than 14,000 people. But Tuchel's friends there remember a boy whose ambitions lay far beyond the Bavarian community. His will to win was evident early. Tuchel often captained his youth football teams, and his school side lifted the national German football trophy in 1987. The Sport took the young defender on a whistle-stop tour of South Germany, from Augsburg to Stuttgart and then Ulm. A knee injury ended his playing career at the age of 25, though. Tuchel accepted his first coaching role in the Stuttgart youth setup in 2000, hired by none other than Ralf Rangnick. Under Tuchel's stewardship, the club's under-19s won their league title in 2005. But Stuttgart chose not to renew his contract, feeling Tuchel had an abrasive personality. He went on to manage Augsburg's second team before spending 5 years at the helm at Mainz. He then followed in Jurgen Klopp's footsteps and moved from Mainz to Dortmund. Here, Tuchel secured his first major silverware, the German Cup, in 2017. 8 more major trophies came next for Tuchel in just 5 glorious seasons. He won 2 Ligue 1 titles and a pair of domestic cups as PSG boss. At Chelsea, he famously lifted the Champions League, as well as a Super Cup and a Club World Cup, and he also bagged a Bundesliga at Bayern Munich. And then, 4 months after leaving Bayern, Tuchel was unveiled as England's new manager.
I always wanted to come back to England. That was my big goal. I have the best memories of the country, of the league and of the players, the attitude towards the game, the attitudes from the supporters.
Well, here's hoping Tuchel can finally drag England over the line at a major tournament.
Hello and welcome to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express. I'm Kevin Hatchard, deputising for Danny tonight. Alongside me, the Messi to my Alvarez, the football supercomputer that is Andy Brassell. It's a 4-hour spectacular tonight. We'll look back in detail at the 4 World Cup quarterfinals that we brought you here on talkSPORT in the last few days, and we'll throw forward to a couple of fascinating semi-finals. We'll take a look at some of the big hitters who fell flat. How will Jurgen Klopp fare as the new coach of Germany? And is the Cristiano Ronaldo era finally over for Portugal? We'll have a dash of club football too, with transfer stories and a look at what you might have missed this summer in Europe's major leagues. It's all coming your way on Trans-Europe Express. So lots of football coming your way over the next 4 hours, but we are going to start with tennis because the men's final at Wimbledon has reached its conclusion. Let's get an update from Lisa O'Sullivan.
Kev, Sinner is the winner once again. Yannick Sinner has gone back-to-back to win the 2026 Wimbledon Championships. He becomes the 10th player in the Open era to retain the men's title here at the All England Club. The world number 1 had to come from a set down to get past the new number 2, Alexander Zverev, in 4 closely contested sets. 3 hours, 46 minutes on the clock. The pair swapped tie breaks in the first 2 sets, but it was Sinner who finally got the break of serve to take the third 6-3. The momentum swing was completed in the 4th when Sinner served it out to beat the German for a 10th match in a row. His 2nd Wimbledon title is his 5th Grand Slam crown, worth £3.6 million, and keeps him top of the world rankings. Yannick Sinner wins his 100th Grand Slam match and is the 2026 Wimbledon champion, 6-7, 7-6, 6-3, 6-4.
Thanks to Lisa O'Sullivan, who's been doing sterling work at SW19 over the past couple of weeks. So from Yannick Sinner to a man who's never been a sinner in his life, Andy Brassell is with us on the show tonight. Andy, our poll is very straightforward. Who is going to win the World Cup? That, of course, is either going to be Argentina, England, Spain or France. You can get in touch with us on 81089 or via our various social media channels. But Andy, we want to start with England, don't we? Because that phenomenal 2-1 win over Norway wasn't perfect in the Miami Heat, of course, but the man who stepped up to score both goals for England, Jude Bellingham, is somebody we've watched many, many times, whether it's captaining Borussia Dortmund at the age of 19, whether it's leading the charge for Real Madrid as they won the Champions League. This is a guy that English football in general should be very proud of, right?
Yeah, and I like the way you framed it, Kev, as being in the Miami Heat, because the level of the performance, you could imagine him amongst LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and Shaq and all those stars of the past that have lit up Miami in a sporting sense. Look, I think we should probably talk about this in the fact that some people have obviously had their words on how people viewed Bellingham before the start of the tournament. Now, look, I don't think you need us or anyone listening needs us to tell you that Jude Bellingham has been one of the players of the tournament overall, not just as far as England goes. And who knows how far he can take that. But a lot of people did have doubts about him before the tournament. And I think we need to discuss why that was. Really is something that's followed Jude Bellingham throughout the tournament. And, you know, I think obviously one particular newspaper article by Craig Hope has been reproduced quite a lot and discussed on this channel. But, you know, I know Craig, he's got his right to his opinion and he set it out pretty early on. But he wasn't the only person to say that. And for people to pretend that that's the case, I think is ridiculous, really. And I just want to get into this really, Kev, because for you and I, who've seen Bellingham pretty much every week, really, since 2020, because we've seen him every step of the way, as you say, at Borussia Dortmund, every step of the way at Real Madrid, it feels to me that a lot of the stuff around Bellingham is speculation based on a lot of people not seeing him play all the time and taking certain actions of his out of context. Whereas for me, he's just a winner who desperately wants to win all the time, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I think people take what I believe is a healthy dose of swagger and arrogance and that burning will to win as something a bit more nefarious or something that's going to upset a squad or upset, you know, a coach. And I look at even the talk now about a potential rift between him and Thomas Tuchel, because Tuchel, of course, in the aftermath of that 2-1 win against Norway, said there were elements of the performance he wasn't happy with, said England had been a bit lucky maybe to get through. And I think that was then put to Bellingham that the manager wasn't happy with the performance. And his response was whatever to the ITV reporter. And then he went on to kind of say, well, you know, maybe he hasn't played in these difficult conditions against these top players. But the truth is, this is somebody who will make demands up and down. He will, you know, ball out his teammates if he doesn't feel they're hitting the standards he expects or the team expects or the fans expect. And he'll do that for coaches as well. He'll hold everybody to account, including himself. You know, I think he speaks very honestly, and I think he speaks in an extraordinary fashion for a guy who's 23. I mean, it blows my mind.
He always has.
Yeah,
he always has, right? I mean, it's not new for him.
No.
And I guess that's why, for example, if we go back to when Dortmund didn't quite win the league in 2023, go back 3 years ago, and about a month before the end of the season, they lose at Bayern Dortmund, like they always lose. And Bellingham says, look, this isn't good enough. We're challenging for the league. And he tears out some of his teammates on the pitch, and Emre Can, the captain, turns around to him and says, yeah, you can't do that, and talked about it again afterwards and talked about the optics of it. He said, you've got to realize how it looks in front of 70, 80,000 people. It's all about body language, and you know, you can't behave in a certain way. But it is funny, isn't it, how on one hand people want passion, they want the real, and then from Bellingham it feels like at times they get a little bit too much of it. You know, like nothing's hidden, nothing's airbrushed at all. And I think what you were saying there about the supposed clash between him and Thomas Tuchel, which to me felt like a healthy and frank exchange of views. I don't think Gabriel Clark did anything wrong, and I don't think either Tuchel or Bellingham did anything wrong. But it's just not very English, is it? That's the problem with it. That neither the way that Tuchel or Bellingham approach things is not talking around the issue, is ploughing straight into it with his size 10s on.
I think it's quite German. I think,
it is, isn't it?
And I think German football, and we're going to talk about, you know, what Jurgen Klopp might do with Germany and what they need going forward later in the show. But they have this idea of a Führungsspieler, which is basically a leading player, somebody, usually a midfielder or maybe a centre forward, but somebody would get the team by the scruff of the neck and drag them forward, whether that was an Effenberg or whether it was a Mateus or a Ballack or a Müller or somebody like that who would grab the team and hurl it forwards. And Germany are desperate for a player like that. There are other nations that would absolutely kill for a player like that. And I understand people's suspicion of arrogance, because you're absolutely right. We don't do that very well in this country, I don't think. But a lot of nations do. And I think he's a player we need to cherish. I think he's a player we need to protect. I think he's a player that we need to laud as much as possible. I think Tuchel has played it right to add a bit of competitive tension there and to say, well, look, we know you're very good, but Morgan Rogers is playing very well. And if you don't hit top gear and if you're not ready, then you might not play. And I don't think that's done Jude any harm. But I'm glad he's getting the flowers that he deserves, because I do think this is a genuine world-class talent already at 23. He's played in 4 major tournaments for England. The career he will have had at 28, 29, I think could be absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, that's right. And I said before the start of the tournament that if England were going to have any chance of winning it, Bellingham had to play and had to start. And look, whatever people's views on Bellingham, a widely expressed view from a lot of people is that Morgan Rogers would or should start in front of him. That was never a view that I subscribed to. And, you know, I've got the receipts. It's all about the receipts at the moment. But look, I think that's not a knock on Morgan Rogers. But I think what we've seen in this tournament is Bellingham is a guy who stands up at the big moments. It's not just about him being an unbelievably good, world-class, multifaceted player. I think it's about that ability to lean into the difficult moments. And I think that's both verbally and on the pitch. You know, you can look at the Azteca just as you can look at the interview after last night. There's no shying away from anything. And that's what makes him so special.
Yeah, he's powering England's run in this World Cup. I do want to talk about Norway, because England were not perfect at all. Norway will look at lots of the little moments. I know they'll talk about the spider cam and did the ball hit the spider cam cable and was that responsible for England's first goal. But overall,
what 2026 discussion?
Yeah,
honestly.
Exactly. what the state of modern football? We're talking about did the ball hit the spider cam cable? That's where we've got to. But Norway in general, my fear ahead of the tournament was not about Haaland, not about Ødegaard. We knew they would perform. It was about could the supporting cast come through. It was about could the defenders do what they needed to do. Could Julian Riasson do what he needed to do? And actually, unfortunately, I don't think we quite saw that because he was injured for a lot of it. He had those muscle injuries pretty much all the way through. But you look at the goalkeeper, Ian Nieland, who's not a first choice at club level, and I had big concerns about him. Yes, he makes the mistake for the winning goal for England, but up until then, Andy, I thought
he gets them that far.
Yeah.
He's a huge part of it. And do you know what? I thought for the 90 minutes, I felt like Norway shaded it. I felt like they worked the game a little bit like they did against Brazil, and they had the better opportunities. There's no doubt about that. Now, physically, they couldn't quite stay with it in extra time. And the way England played extra time without being spectacular was really, really good, I thought. But I think you look at Norway's depth is greater than anyone expected. And sometimes you just get that prevailing feeling, don't you? And it's not just about, you know, taking advantage of world-class talents like Haaland, like Ødegaard. And Ødegaard was great, I thought, last night as well. It's about that feeling of we're going somewhere and we can do something. And I think actually Fredrik Aursnes is a really good example of that, of Benfica, who I think has been really good in the bits that he has played in this tournament. Now, he was retired from international football, which is bizarre, obviously, for a man who's just turning 30 for a number of years. But he came back, and it takes us back to the Miami Heat right back at the beginning. You know, when you've got a championship team, it's easy to get good guys on minimum contracts because they want to be part of a winning culture. And it's the same with Arsenal, isn't it? It's that feeling that something's happening. And so even if people from the outside just saw it as Haaland and Ødegaard and some guys, I don't think, without being boastful, because the Norwegians are even less boastful than the English, were like that. I think there was a sense that actually we could do something here.
Yeah.
And they certainly played like that.
And what a year it's been for Norwegian football as well, because you look at what Bodø Glimt did in the Champions League. It was great to see Patrick Berg, who plays in midfield for them, playing for Norway as well. So it's been a phenomenal effort from Norway, not just at international level at this World Cup, but at club level as well. Coming up after the break on Trans Europe Express, we're going to take a look at France's win over Morocco.
Newcastle's summer exodus is set to reach a crisis point. Sean, you'll have heard this news. Sandro Tonali, Anthony Gordon, of course, already out the door. Club captain and fan favourite Bruno Guimaraes has reportedly informed the hierarchy that he wants to join champions Arsenal. With another star player forcing his way out, Darren Bent raised serious concerns about what this loss could mean for Eddie Howe next season.
Yeah, I do feel for Eddie Howe. I really do, because again, if Bruno leaves tonight, he's obviously gone to Tottenham as well. Isaac, they just haven't been able to kind of recruit the players in certainly the quality that they've lost. And you look at what they've bought some of these players for. Isaac, was it 60 million? They're selling for 120. Like tonight, they bought him for a fee. They're selling for more. So clearly, he's improving these players. But at some point, I think if Newcastle do want to go to the next level, they've got. I know it's hard with the PSR and the financial fair play, but if they do want to go to the next level and then stay there, they've got to find a way of holding on to some of these players.
Oh, look at Darren and his floral number. Watching on the smart TV, I like that. Sure. Do you have sympathy for Eddie Howe in this situation? The latest is that Bruno has agreed personal terms with Arsenal, but Newcastle's stance is that he remains not for sale.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's really tough, and the challenge that you have is not just if one of your big players goes at any football club, at any level really. People understand there's a time and a place. When two go, that can make other players a bit itchy and a bit nervy. But then if three go, all of a sudden they go, hang on a minute, who are we bringing in? And I think they're right on that cusp. I don't know their situation at PSR, but I've been through that, obviously, in my time at Everton, so I know how dangerous that can be. But I think losing the players of that quality, I think that's really tough on Eddie, and I think he's done a great job there. So hopefully, I mean, look, you never know on the other side of that. Good people in their recruitment there. They've shown that over the years, so they might have people lined up, don't forget. So these things can twist very quickly when you get a freshness in the camp and a newness and some quality, and all of a sudden it can feel different.
Lays it back to Dembele. There's real trouble here. Dembele charging on and finding the net. It's beyond Bono. It's two for France. Dembele, too hot to handle, and that is it. The favourites have delivered. France are into the World Cup semi-finals. Can anybody at this World Cup stop France? France 2, Morocco 0.
The dulcet tones there of Joe Shannon, who brought you live commentary of that win for France. 2-0 against Morocco in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. Remember, every single game of the World Cup has come your way across the talkSPORT network, and that will be the case for the remaining games as well. Andy, really intriguing game this, France against Morocco, because I think a lot of people thought that Morocco could maybe slow France down. They'd shown that they could control patches of games. They were able to knock out the Dutch, of course. This is a team that, you know, has done so well at the last World Cup, reaching the semi-finals, where again they lost to France. But this French team has the ability to go up a gear, and when you've got somebody like Mbappe, who out of nothing really can just find the far corner and score the opening goal, it's so difficult to contain them for 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's funny. When Mbappe missed that penalty, there was a little bit of the feeling that you got from watching Leo Messi against Austria, a game that I was lucky enough to be at in Dallas, where it was like, by missing that penalty, he's just provoked himself into pulling something mad out the bag here, isn't he? And that's
Don't
exactly
make him angry.
what
You wouldn't like him when he's angry.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I thought what was so interesting about this game, apart from the fact that they have this unstoppable force at the front, which is a little bit like, they're a little bit like an international Bayern Munich, aren't they, at the moment, France? Partly because of one particular player. But there's this feeling of, you have this absolute force of nature at the front of the team. It's like, is he even the best player in this team? You know,
that's
with
the crazy
Michael
thing,
Elise
right? That is the crazy
lurking
thing.
in the background. It really is.
I was thinking about this with the golden ball, right? Because obviously, let's say, for example, Kylian Mbappe gets the golden boot and France win it. I don't think it's necessarily a given that he then wins the golden ball, which is player of the tournament. Because I think, you know, the people who decide these things, I know there's narrative, and I know Mbappe's a superstar, and I get all that. But I just think the way Elise has played has not only been so effective, but so easy on the eye as well. I mean, he's so aesthetically pleasing to watch. Do you think let's say France do win it. Sorry, England fans and Spain fans and Argentine fans. Let's say they do. Do you think he'd be a live runner to win that Player of the Tournament award, Elise?
He'd be in the mix, but I don't think he'd win it. What I said going back to April is that Michael Elise can't win the Ballon d'Or, but he can make either Kane or Mbappe win it. And I think that'll probably end up not being a million miles off that prediction. I mean, obviously, if it goes as all England fans want, then both those guys will be out of the equation, and it might be Harry Kane, because I think it's an interesting thing when we talk about the best player in a team. I know this is a slightly sideways discussion, but if we're talking about the best player in a team or the best player in any one of these teams, I think it shows how much the axis of football is sort of shifting post Messi and Ronaldo, when the Ballon d'Or was their personal possession. And the criteria for winning it in the new age are clearly going to be different going forward. But I just feel, whereas normally in the Messi Ronaldo years, you would say the biggest weight of goals plus who won the Champions League is probably going to do it in most years. Whereas this World Cup has been so absorbing, partly because it's been very long, but I think partly because attacking football has been rewarded on many occasions, and great attacking play, if not relentlessly attacking football, has been rewarded on so many occasions. It feels to me like the best player at this World Cup has got a great shot of winning the Ballon d'Or, like independently of what might have happened in the Champions League final. I just feel that I don't
that
feel
seems like 10 years ago, by the way. Now that
it does, doesn't it? It does. But it has been such an absorbing, such a satisfying World Cup in terms of what's happened on the pitch in so many ways. If I had to pick a prediction for Ballon d'Or, it's going to be one of those three. I think it's going to be one of Kane, Mbappe, and Elise, probably Kane or Mbappe, depending on what happens in the last week or so of this tournament.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how it shakes down. I want to ask you about the the whole team, because we've talked about Mbappe, we've talked about Olise. Ousmane Dembele, I think, is probably his best ever tournament for France. I think that's fair to say. It was a low bar, but he's kind of stepped gently over that low bar. I think he obviously scored a very important goal against Morocco, but I think the defensive work as well, I think he's been selfless, I think, at times as well. He's been happy to kind of move into that wider area to let Olise do his thing in the middle. But you look at the defensive numbers, they're really good. I mean, the data is excellent. They're barely giving away chances, really. To you, do they look the most complete team at this stage?
Yeah, definitely. If I think the thing that the other three teams can look at is the best team doesn't always win a cup competition. And that's what it is. You know, I don't think the World Cup is great, but it's also a cup competition. And that means that it's not necessarily a marker of the best team in the world, even if Argentina won it by being the best team in the final, going back to 2022. And look, I guess the World Cup more often produces the best team in the world, or an indicator of the best team in the world, because it's a slightly longer tournament, and even more so this time. But France are relentless. They're entertaining, they're interesting, they're great to watch. You know they've got the best players. That's not even a discussion. And again, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll win the tournament. But yeah, they're the most complete team. No, I think it's funny. Someone said to me, Robert Hoot actually said to me a few weeks ago, with the defensive issues of France, or the perceived defensive issues of France, he felt that people were looking for a reason to not say they were the overwhelming favourites. Now, look, I know people have question marks over Upamecano, who I still think has been good this tournament. And I think he's a better player than he was 2 years ago. I think that there's the left-back question. And Lucadine, even though ideally France would have a slightly better left-back, he's been neat and tidy, I think it's fair to say. The performance that I think is really remarkable so far is, and of course, Jules Koundé has been very good as always. I think William Saliba, given that they've been kind of nursing him through the beginning of this tournament with this back injury that won't go away, the standard to which he has performed has been like pretty remarkable, I would say. If you're looking for a point to make a case that Saliba is the best centre-back in the world, I think the last couple of weeks are going to do it for you, and maybe the next week, if France end up being victorious, will do it for you. I think the other thing we have to say is the two in front of them are so important, because you bear in mind that France, because they've got all these attacking players, to me, the only reason why they're not going to win this World Cup is they're a little bit top-heavy. There's a little bit of a sense they've maybe got one too many attacking player in the team, and it's a move away from what Didier Deschamps traditionally does. I mean, for what it's worth, in a team that was set to frustrate them in Morocco in that quarter-final, I think that they had that mix of patience and relentlessness, and it really worked, and it showed why the new shape works. But what it means is without the ball, they've got to be really good. And without the ball, they're going to have to be really good against Spain, it's fair to say. I think if you'd have asked a lot of people before the tournament, could they do that without Aurélien Tchouameni, people would have said no. But Manu Koné has been outstanding so far. Really, really good. And Rabiot, for me, is perennially underrated.
I think Koné's improvement from the guy I used to watch week in, week out at Borussia Mönchengladbach is unbelievable. Unbelievable since he got to Roma, because you were waiting. You were like, we know he's good. You can see why he's good. You can see the things that he can do. But he was so inconsistent. He was so anonymous in certain games, and you were just wanting to shake him and say, right, when are you going to get to this next level? He's absolutely done that. I'm so pleased for him, because he's really worked hard at that and found that level. Of course, we've talked about the winners of that quarter-final. We should mention the team that went out, because Morocco, I think, have won a lot more friends in this tournament, just as they did 4 years ago in Qatar. They had a change in coach. That hasn't harmed them at all. And I guess with Mohamed Wabi, the coach, he's another one like De La Fuente, who's come through the youth ranks, like Scaloni. These are company guys who were youth coaches at international level and have now shown they can make that seamless transition.
Yeah, and I think it makes a lot of sense for international teams. I think the time where you're thinking, right, let's go out and get the best club coach on the market who's unattached, I think those times have generally passed, even though England and Thomas Tuchel seems to be working pretty well so far. I think that sort of Southgate, De La Fuente curve like knowing the whole system, knowing the players is really important. Of course, with Morocco, it's an extra challenge because we know that Morocco, the Moroccan government, the Moroccan FA have invested millions and millions into top-level training and development facilities. And to me, it's interesting to think how good and what the composition of the Morocco squad will be in, say, 10 years' time, because we're not going to see it instantly with everything that's happened. But given that, you know, they fielded that team against Brazil with 11 overseas-born players, I think that makes the job even more impressive, because it's not the same job as De La Fuente, because you're dealing with a load of guys who were born and brought up and developed abroad in different systems. Now, really, I think if we're looking at the ability to be cosmopolitan, that probably quite helps. Like, to have people from really different sort of situations, different ways of problem solving. I think that's quite unusual in international football if we're going back 10, 15 years. And that's probably really, really helpful for Morocco. I guess the other thing I would like to say is they were really criticised in some quarters for the way they played against France. I just thought they were honestly outbeaten, outworked by a much better, not just technically, but physically team. Yeah. I thought the fact that Aybouyadi had to go off after an hour and he looked like he was going to fall over and needed a sleep, I think is remarkable, really. And the problem for them, because they didn't have a centre forward, is every time they got the ball out, they couldn't make it stick. Yeah. They had no out ball and it kept coming straight back at them.
Yeah, and Naziri not in that squad, which raised a few eyebrows, but they just weren't able to find an outlet. But still a very impressive tournament from them. Right, coming up after the break on Trans Europe Express, we'll take a look at Spain's win over Belgium.
I mean, as recently as 2024, Bruno Touzazol, he told everybody who cared to listen what he wanted to achieve at Newcastle.
I never said that I would like to leave. Since I signed for the club, I always said I want to put my name in the club history, and nothing changed. Nothing changed from me. It is keeping going. I still want to win some trophy for me. When I signed for the club, I said I want to play Champions League, and everyone said that I was crazy. And we got it. Now I wanna be in Champions League again. I wanna win something for the club. I think the fans deserve. We are worked so hard to get it. So this is still my dream.
And then a year later, Simon, they win the Carabao Cup, and Bruno says, "This is my second home. We're making history. Someday, when I leave this club, I want the fans to sing my name the way they do Alan Shearer." I'm not sure that's going to happen.
Well, look, first and foremost, ask yourself the question: why are these players suddenly all deserting the sinking ship? It's not a sinking ship, but it doesn't appear to be a particularly ambitious one. It doesn't appear to have an ownership model that everyone thought was going to change the whole direction of football. Oh my God, we've just sold to a nation state, one of the richest nation states, and look what they're going to do to football. But they haven't done anything. They're going to buy everybody. They're going to buy Ronaldo. They're going to buy Messi. They're going to have this player here, that player, this player, you know, and they haven't. Yeah. They bought a bunch of players that to some extent they've gone and made better. And these players are now doing what every player does, which is go, Liverpool.
Yes.
Oh, Arsenal.
Yeah.
Oh, Real Madrid. And that's what Newcastle have found themselves in a position of doing. So ask yourself the question, despite the vilification of a player that 2 years ago said he wanted to stay, nothing lasts forever. He's done his 2 years. He is entitled to leave. How he leaves is the key component part of this. But also, why? Why are Newcastle now a place where people want to leave from?
Yeah.
And that's the problem Eddie Howe's got. That's
Pedro Porro on the overlap, back in field to Dani Olmo, beaten away by Courtois, but fired in by Fabian Ruiz, and Spain have the lead, 1-0. But here's a cross in towards De Catalara, and Charles De Catalara has equalised for Belgium, and hold the back page, Belgium score at this World Cup, and it's Spain who concede for the first time, and it's 1-1. Back to De Bruyne, lovely ball, and Doku pulls it back and then fired towards goal, and it's the side netting. And it was a great chance for Maxime de Kuyper. Now it's squared to Pau Kabasi. He strikes it low, Lambert's just lost it, and it's hammered in, and yet again, it's Mikel Merino. The Arsenal man steps off the bench and has surely won the game for Spain. It's Spain 2, Belgium 1, and Spain, yet again, have found the big moment. And that's it. Spain are into the semi-final. Mikel Merino, their match winner once again.
Fantastic Nigel Adderley on the mic for that one, as Spain edged out Belgium. And Andy, they really did edge them out in the end. This was not perhaps the comfortable win that some thought it might be. That says a lot about how Belgium grew into the tournament, I think. But I want to start by talking about Mikel Merino, because this is a guy, you go back to Euro 2024 and Germany pushed them all the way in those quarterfinals. Who's the one who comes up with that late moment? It's him. And he's not starting games. It wasn't certain he was even going to be part of this squad because of injury. But when Luis de la Fuente talks about players, when he talks about Merino, he talks about him being perfect for the environment of the Spain squad, perfect for the kind of mentality that they have. And he knows that even if Merino doesn't start a game, he can come on and he can trust him to deliver. I mean, he's been a phenomenal player, not just for Spain, but big moments for Arsenal as well in winning the Premier League.
Yeah, I think we can probably call him Basque David Platt at this point, can't he? With those late runs into the box.
He's off to Bari any day now.
Yeah. I just think he's someone who's not had it easy. Of course, we go all the way back and it doesn't feel like it was the same career, but that he went to Dortmund and it didn't really work out. He went to Newcastle, didn't really work out. And look at him now. It's pretty amazing in terms of a career trajectory when one wrong move can make people look at you differently and two wrong moves make people think you're not that guy, really. And I think you're right, not just his personality and his ability to pitch in at any moment, but the way Spain play. You know, there is that vacant spot because they don't play with a, I suppose, traditional number 9. There is always that spot to drift into. So really the way Spain play and the way he attacks space in and around the penalty spot, I think is a really, really good combination for Spain. And they needed it in this because, you know, they were less like hammering on the door as more sort of, you know, politely throwing small stones at the bedroom window, really, weren't they?
Just to see if Courtois would notice.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. And I thought Belgium played them really well. But it was good to see Spain have something to think about, really, for the first time. It felt like a big step up in opposition to what they played so far, with no disrespect to, obviously, Cape Verde, who got a draw out of them, and no disrespect to Austria or any of the others. But it felt like Spain had to really work for this. And I think from the perspective of De La Fuente and staff, that must be quite satisfying.
There's lots of little bits in this team that work so well. Dani Olmo, I love. You know, his movement is incredible. You know, wonderfully technically gifted player. Oyarzabal, who gets a lot of stick, way more stick than he deserves, because he doesn't play for Real Madrid. He doesn't play for Barcelona. He plays for Real Sociedad, and proudly so. But his movement is so intelligent. And I think he's really gifted. Scored that late winner against England in the Euros final. You know, lots of parts of the team work really well. The one everybody's looking to is Lamine Yamal. His defensive work, I think, has been very, very good. We still haven't quite seen the Lamine that we're used to seeing for Barcelona week in, week out. But given his fitness concerns going into the tournament, Andy, that's to be expected, isn't it?
It is. It's been a sort of soft launch into the tournament for him, but it felt to me that his performance against Belgium was his best so far. I think it's fair to say, and I think it was testament to A, how he's growing into the game, and B, how smartly Rudy Garcia managed those last two Belgium games that he brought in Joaquin Seys to deal with him. Really, and that worked pretty well. I thought he played him quite well, says generally, especially someone who's relatively inexperienced at this level. But look, the beauty of Lamine Yamal is, even though he's got all the talent in the world, he never plays like a guy who feels like he has to beat 7 players and score himself to win the game. There are so many different ways that he can affect it. So he can beat 3 or 4 and commit players and score. But he can also play the right pass early. That's what's always made him so special.
So good at that.
Exactly, that he's Messi and Beckham combined, really. There are so many different ways that he can affect the game. It's like he's several different football brains in one, really. So if there's anyone who's well equipped to cope with the fact that he is a little bit physically diminished at the moment, that's it. And the idea that, you know, Spain can't win if he doesn't pull a worldly performance out of the bag, I don't think is right, because I don't think that's his aim when he goes into a game as well. Just affect a couple of moments. And if he can do that, it's easily enough for Spain to win. And as you say, they've got so many different goal-scoring options. So you've got Marino, who can drift in from midfield. You've got Ferran Torres, who can come off the bench and get you a goal. He's probably the best finisher in the squad.
There's another one, massively underrated. Nobody talks about him as a top-line forward. It's crazy to me.
Totally. And he is a deadly, and he is a number 9, by the way. Yeah. Don't get it wrong. He is a number 9. And, you know, Luis Enrique will tell you that. Pep Guardiola will tell you that. Like I said, absolutely natural finisher. But really, that sort of depth, I think, is what allows them to cope with Lamine Yamal not being 100%, with Nico Williams getting injured during the tournament. They have had injuries coming into and during this tournament that would finish a lot of good teams, that would blow them way off course. You know, they were able to go into this game and they didn't start Pedri, which is ridiculous, really. And yet they still have a level of control and they still get it done in the end.
So we've raved about France, we've raved about Spain. Who's going to win?
I think France, but I don't think there's a lot in it. And like I said, I think France have better players than anyone, but Spain's ability to ride out losing big players, I think, is absolutely key in a context like this, that they're able to do that. There's no moaning. They can just make do and mend, and they've got versatile and intelligent enough footballers. You know, there can be a Pedri game, there can be a Lamine Yamal game, there can be a Nico Williams game, there can be an Oyarzabal game. Like you say, any of those guys, there can be Dani Olmo game. Any of those guys can step up and win you the game at any given moment. And, you know, all this discussion before the tournament about by the way, the discussion outside Spain, not inside Spain, about are they playing their best keeper? Well, if you can't get close enough, does it even matter?
Yes.
You know, how
he
many
worries
good
me,
chances have they...
Unai Simon. He worries me. I think there were a couple of moments against Belgium, one where he loses the ball and it makes his way to De Bruyne and he's miles out, but De Bruyne can't get the shot away. And the other one where he came miles out and was never going to get to the ball. It got dribbled round him and they couldn't force it home from a tight angle. But yeah, he would be, if you were asking me who's the weak link in the team, for me, it's him. Because I think there's always a Rick in him somewhere.
Yeah, there is. I kind of feel that, though, if I was looking at it from a Spain perspective, I would feel he got those out of his system without any tangible penalty. So that's probably quite a good thing from their perspective. But, you know, because they've defended so tidily, admittedly against like not always competitive opposition, I think you could almost argue that they could have a midfielder in goal a lot of the time, couldn't you? You know, someone who can distribute the ball and keep it going like really easily. You know, this team would be pretty good with Sergio Busquets in goal. Obviously, they'd be really good with Carlos Busquets in goal because he was an actual goalkeeper. But look, you know what I'm saying, don't you?
Is not the word.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying, though, don't you?
Absolutely.
That fact that they defend by circulating the ball so much of the time. I just think it's really interesting when they face France, because if you think Belgium, if they'd have been able to break more effectively, that they could have had them on toast, really.
Yeah.
Well, France can break effectively, can't they? More effectively than anyone, in fact.
Yeah, probably the best transitional team in the tournament. We might find that out in that first semi-final. Of course, you'll hear every kick of that live with us here on talkSPORT. Coming up, we're going to take a look at how the Asian sides fared at the World Cup.
I think you're underestimating Bruno Guimaraes. I mean, you can look at the figures and say, yeah, not brilliantly impressive, but every Newcastle fan will tell you he's the heartbeat of their team.
Yeah, that's Newcastle, though, Jeff. Jeff, we're not Newcastle United.
Oh,
right?
Joe, don't be arrogant. Do not be arrogant, pal.
What do you mean not be arrogant? We're Premier League champions.
Yeah,
I'm not saying I don't want him at the club.
Yeah, you're Premier League champions now. You're Premier League champions now. Let's come on in 12 months' time and find out if you're going to say the same thing if you're not Premier League champions then.
Jeff, of course we're Premier League champions. We just won it a few months ago. Come on, Yeah. So you got to give us a bit of time. What I'm saying is, good player, but I don't want him to be the marquee signing. If he is the marquee signing, I'm going to be upset.
Well, I tell you what, Joe, shouldn't you be worried? You're talking about marquee signings. Aren't you concerned about financial fair play, or the equivalent of as it is now? And you busting the rules.
Get rid of everyone you need to get rid of to make it happen. Because if you're spending 60 mil on a player, then that means people need to go as well, right? Get rid of. We've just spoken about Norgard. If you don't like him, get rid of
Trossard,
him.
Gabriel Jesus.
We're hearing Trossard. Get rid of all of them. To be fair, I do like Trossard. And if it was up to me, I'd get rid of Martinelli instead. But get rid of who you need to get rid of. Then we can start talking business. But this better not be the marquee signing.
I do the marquee signing, but I agree that Arsenal need a left winger. Do you know what I mean? Don't spend 80 million on Guimaraes and then you can't afford to go and buy, like, if Barcola's available, for instance, Joel, and he's worth 100. You need a top left winger, don't you, on that side?
100%. And that's what I want to see. I want to see someone. Look, the reality is if Marcus Rashford was available at a good price, I would probably go for him. As long as, it doesn't unbalance the team, because he's a great player. And the reason why I say
White and Jordan returns tomorrow from 1 p.m. as Jim White and Simon Jordan will be joined by the Brighton manager Fabian Hutzler as they look back on England's World Cup quarter-final win against Norway. That's White and Jordan tomorrow from 1 p.m. Now, some interesting breaking transfer news. It's being reported that Aston Villa are closing on a deal to sign Johan Manzambi, the Swiss international midfielder from Freiburg. Now, Newcastle United had an agreement with Freiburg, but the reports are suggesting that the player did not consent to the move, and Aston Villa have nipped in there. We're going to talk about Manzambi a bit more later in the show, but he's definitely been one of the most impressive young players at the tournament. So reports suggesting that Aston Villa are going to beat Newcastle to the signing of the Switzerland midfielder Johan Manzambi. Time to take a look at how Asian sides got on at the World Cup, and nobody better to bring onto the show than the Asian football expert and journalist John Durden. John, great to have you with us.
Thank you, Kevin. How are you?
Very well, very well. I want to start with Iran because, of course, they were one of the big stories of this World Cup. They had various difficulties which have been well publicised in terms of visas and in terms of, when they could go to venues and had to fly straight back and what have you. They narrowly missed out on a place in the knockout phase. What would have been par for them? Do you think they were desperately disappointed that even though they had all those hurdles, they didn't quite play as well as they can? Because in the qualifiers, they showed they've got real quality.
Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine that if all things had been kind of equal, they would have squeezed through. I mean, it's not just what happened in during the tournament itself and just before with the visa situation, having to be stationed in Tijuana and then go to the US and come back every time. But even since the war started in February, the local league in Iran hasn't been taking place at all. So you've got a large part of the squad just haven't played any football really for kind of 3-4 months before they arrived. Preparations in March also took a hit, and it's always difficult for Iran anyway to kind of prepare for international tournaments because they don't get the friendlies that the likes of Japan and Korea get. Teams don't want to go to Tehran, so this just made it much worse. And of course, as you mentioned, the whole political side of things, I think also has a huge pressure on the players. As I think Mehdi Taremi said, the captain and the striker, in one press conference, nobody ever asked us about the football. It's all about the politics. So in some ways, I think 3 draws, isn't a terrible return. But yeah, I mean, probably as Asia's second best team, you'd think there will be a bit disappointed to go through. But I think if things had been normal, I think they would have done.
I think,
John, in terms of where, sorry, Kevin, John, in terms of where expectation lies, what about Japan? Because it felt like, if you look at it from the outside, going out to Brazil at the World Cup is not a disgraceful result by any stretch of the imagination. But if you look at how the Netherlands were really flattered by that result in the first game, I thought the 2-2 draw. At that point, you know, I think a lot of people who were saying before the tournament that Japan are Asia's best hope, I think that is backed by that performance in the first game. And then against Brazil, they're fine in the game until they're not. So what's the reaction been in Japan to that?
Yeah, well, it's been mixed. As you said, I mean, Japan are Asia's best team by some distance these days. And I think usually there will be some kind of acceptance of losing to Brazil. But this was Japan's fifth game, a knockout game in the World Cup. They've never won one yet. I think that is a disappointment, really, that they've been there 4 times before and always managed to lose. Playing Brazil, of course, was a huge hurdle, but they beat Brazil at home 3-2 in Tokyo a few months earlier. And there is a sense that maybe with a bit more self-belief and a bit more aggression, you know, they could have beat Brazil, especially when this feeling this has been heightened by what happened in Brazil's next game, of course, when they lost against Norway, and that makes even more people in Japan think, you know, we could have won this game, and maybe even we should have won this game. But also, it should be remembered that, you know, maybe 4 of Japan's, you know, biggest and best players, Endo, Mitoma, Kubo, and Minamino, were all injured, and they all would have started if they'd been fit. So with those 4, maybe it would have been different. But yeah, it has led to a bit of debate. Not only is, you know, could we have gone for it a bit more? Could we have won? I think the answer is yes. But also in a wider Asian sense, you know, Japan is a little bit unfortunate in that it plays almost all its games in Asia. I mean, and the standards at the moment are not enough to give it, maybe equip Japan for the real test it needs when it comes against the best in the world. I think in qualification, Japan scored 54 goals and conceded 3. So, I mean, they're not getting tested at all, really. And I think that also shows a little bit on the world stage.
It's really interesting, that belief thing, John, because Moriyasu, the coach, would sometimes sound really confident and talk about winning the thing, not just, well, let's see how far we can get. He would talk about winning the thing. And there's been all this talk about, you know, this long-term plan that Japanese footballers had. But when it came to it, they didn't back themselves, did they? Has there been a lot of talk about the coach? Has there been a lot of talk about this idea that, yes, it's all very well saying it, but when push comes to shove, if you don't show it and you don't really push and think you can go and win, how is it ever going to go forward? It seems like the coach became a bit of a lodestone for that.
Yeah, I think there've been some doubts over Moriyasu in the past. Some people had felt he was too conservative, but because he'd been there for 8 years and you can see the team had been developing and growing in that time, you know, there was also a sense, you know, maybe this is the time. But he kind of reverted back to type, really, in that game against Brazil. The first half was great. And the second half is almost inevitable after Japan sat so deep for so long that, you know, they're going to get caught in injury time. So yeah, I think there have been some voices that said, you know, we're good enough to win this game. Look at what happened with Norway. Brazil aren't that great, and that's always been a bit of an issue with Asian teams. And you thought Japan had got past that, really, because not only did they beat Brazil, they beat England at Wembley, and all the players playing in the top leagues of Europe. Where you think no longer is it the case that they give the big European and South American teams so much respect, but perhaps in this game it did. And it's unfortunate because I think Japan were good enough to go much further in the tournament and maybe reach the last 8, which I think was a real target. I mean, winning it, I think, is something to do, have ambitions to do in the future. But this time, getting to the last 8 would have been a success. And I think they could have done it, but it wasn't to be.
On the other hand, it's not so difficult to frame, John, how we should feel about South Korea. I mean, you know, this is a failure. There's no doubt about it, because we looked at the format of the reformatted tournament beforehand and thought, okay, if you're a good team, you're going to really struggle to not get past the first phase. But they did. And in the end, I guess it all hung on that game against South Africa, the final game, which was a real shock to everyone. I mean, how difficult a pill is it to swallow, especially because when we think about the early days of the World Cup when there was a lot of trepidation about, you know, who would get in, how the tournament would start, how it would unfold. The scenes of the South American fans with the Mexican fans in Mexico City, I think really gave people a swell of optimism about how it might be a great World Cup and how, you know, there might be something there that would mean the fans sort of taking it back from the people running it. So how disappointing was it for the South Koreans to have to go home quite quickly after that?
Yeah, well, it's been hugely disappointing. I mean, and the fallout is still going on. The head of the FA has resigned, the head coach has resigned. I think there may be other heads that will roll as the government and maybe the police even investigate what's been going on at the federation. So, before the tournament, there was a lot of gloom around the team, and I wrote quite a few things saying Korea were not in a great place. They rely on the big stars in moments, but they had a coach who didn't really know his best team and didn't really know how he wanted to play. But then, in the opening game against the Czechs, Korea played quite well and won the game. So things, of course, changed after that. I mean, but looking back, the Czechs turned out to be quite a poor team. And maybe the altitude was a difference when Korea had been based in Mexico for 3 weeks. Some preparation had been great. The Czechs came in just before the game, I think. But losing against Mexico was a bit disappointing. But as you mentioned, the South Africa game was really, really poor. And, all the old kind of 2002 stars like Park Ji-sung and all the rest have been very vocal in their criticism. And, the country's been shocked. And, they had the players to go through, and they should have done. Again, Korea is kind of prides itself in being Asia's most successful World Cup team in terms of appearances and how far it's gone in the tournament in the past. But now it's fallen clearly behind Japan, which is, a source of real pain in Seoul. But it's one of those things now where we've had other big countries in the past, like England, where after Euro 2016, or big failures. I think there's going to be a huge change in Korean football, hopefully, and the debates and the ramifications will run on for some time. But it's a law for Korean football, and I don't know what's going to happen, but hopefully it might be what they need.
And that was one of the big surprises of the World Cup. Thanks to John Durden for that. Real treat to get him on the show. We've only had 1 hour of 4 hours. You lucky, lucky people have got lots more Trans-Europe Express goodness to come right here on talkSPORT.
Because Infantino, though, Simon, has said, yes, I got a call from Trump on Balogun.
Yeah.
They have allowed themselves to be boxed into a ridiculous corner, haven't they?
Well, it's one thing players cheating on a field, but when the people that are supposed to uphold the game ignore the integrity of their own positions, to damage the authenticity of what people might be watching, and challenge the legitimacy of it by allowing one set of group of people to have an advantage and not on others, you should start worrying about the existential threat that has to the game, and start worrying about what's happening to the football and where it's going next, and what will happen to it next.
Because if the Balogun situation did exist, and we never heard of a call going in from Trump to Infantino, the Kwanzaa 2-match ban
would be less controversial.
Would be much less controversial. It would almost come and go.
But again, we've got to distill it backwards, I think. Mm-hmm. If you sit there and you say, why is there no process available to rescind a red card? Why would there not be one? What is the logical thinking? Maybe FIFA can explain to us why it was necessary for the Trump regime to instigate some thinking into FIFA that should have been there in the first place. It shouldn't require Trump to be involved in the conversation. Yeah. It should have been a simple appeal from, and by the way, US Soccer would have been all over this. It wasn't just Trump that did it. It was US Soccer that probably prompted him to do it.
Yeah.
And they're sort of going in the background. It's not us, it's our commander-in-chief. No, Trump makes all the noise and carries all the cachet.
Yeah.
But there should have been a process.
There's no regularity to this, Simon. Ironically, if you get sent off for in the Premier League for serious foul play, it's a 3-match ban.
In a century of World Cups, it's not just the football that's changed. Stadiums have gone from concrete behemoths to technological marvels, and the giant monolithic arenas help to define tournaments. Back in 1930, the world embraced its greatest spectacle for the first time. Uruguay was the host, and in just 90 days, they built a stadium that's still there today. It was a gargantuan effort to pull together the 90,000 capacity Estadio Centenario, one of only 3 venues for that tournament, that would act as a monument to 100 years of Uruguayan independence. If that was the World Cup's birthplace, Mexico City's Estadio Azteca became its cathedral. Some of the World Cup's most iconic moments happened on this grass, including this, of course. Also, both Pelé and Maradona lifted the trophy in the Azteca. A bit of pub quiz ammo for you there, you're welcome. In England, there's no more special place to us than Wembley, the scene of our greatest triumph. And yes, it definitely was a goal. Some incredible stadiums across the world have hosted matches, but you don't have to have a modern-day spaceship of a ground to make it memorable. Take 2006, for example, and here. The memories of what happened at Berlin's Olympiastadion show events on the pitch can elevate a stadium in the minds of fans worldwide. But that doesn't stop us from marvelling at modern triumphs of engineering. Let's jump ahead to Qatar and take a look at this, the Lusail Stadium. This gorgeous golden bowl hosted the frankly unbelievable final in 2022. But that's not where it ends in Qatar. Take Stadium 974, for example. This place was built from shipping containers and can be taken down and built somewhere else. Mad. It's crazy to think that we've gone from building giant concrete bowls to what is basically modern art. To be fair, some concrete bowls, like the Maracanã, are art in its most flawless form. The teams and the players are why we all come, but sometimes the stage they perform on ends up being the main character. And with structures like this, it's hardly a surprise.
You are listening to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassell. Hour 2 of a 4-hour spectacular. In the next hour, can Jurgen Klopp rescue German football? How will Portugal bounce back after their World Cup exit? And what shape are Argentina in ahead of their World Cup semi-final clash with England? It's all coming up very soon on the Trans-Europe Express. We are going to start the hour with Argentina. First, let's hear how they won their quarter-final tie. It came your way live on talkSPORT.
And it's in! Alexis McAllister from the corner. They've scored again in the World Cup. Messi gets the assist. Alexis McAllister makes it Argentina 1, Switzerland 0. Here's Rodriguez into the area, and Doy, can he score? Yes! Darren Doy! And the Swiss pressure pays off, and it's all square in Kansas City. Argentina 1, Switzerland 1, with a quarter of the game to go. Lopez, his first real involvement since coming on. Tall, rangy-looking striker. Knocks it back for Julian Alvarez. Alvarez goes for goal! What a goal! Julian Alvarez comes up trumps for Argentina. And the Swiss resistance is finally broken. 8 minutes to go. And it's Argentina 2, Switzerland 1. A beautiful curling strike from Julian Alvarez. Lautaro Martinez sets the seal on Argentina's passage through to the semi-finals to face England in Atlanta. The old rivalry will be renewed once again. Argentina 3, Switzerland 1. And the referee blows the whistle, and it's Argentina versus England to come in Atlanta on Wednesday night.
The magnificent Ian Danter on the call there for talkSPORT. Argentina beating Switzerland by 3-1 after extra time. And of course, they will now face England, and that's the semi-final that you can hear on Wednesday. Every kick coming your way on talkSPORT. Now, Andy, let's start with what proved to be the key moment in the game, because Switzerland hadn't long equalised through Dan and Doy. Lovely goal. At that stage, you felt Switzerland actually had the momentum. Switzerland were carving holes in that much vaunted Argentinian midfield and prizing open gaps in the defence as well. And then Brassell, who's the very experienced striker for Switzerland, he'd already picked up a yellow card for a clumsy challenge. And then he goes to ground under a challenge. Paredes for Argentina picks up the yellow card initially. Then the replays show that it was a bit of a dive by Embolo. He starts going to ground before the contact comes. And then under this mistaken identity protocol that FIFA have invented, the decision is reversed. The yellow card is taken away from Argentina, and Embolo is given a second yellow card for simulation. He was devastated. It took him a long, long time to leave the pitch and go down to the dressing room. I suppose there are two things here, Andy. The first is it's a ridiculous thing for an experienced player to do, to dive in that way, risk picking up a second yellow card.
Yes.
But I cannot abide this VAR creep that we're seeing time and time again, because slowly but surely it's inching into the game, re-refereeing. That was never what it was meant to do. Yes, people will say we got there in the end with the right decision, but I'm just not happy with the amount of overreach we're seeing from VAR.
Yeah, look, I mean, when you were talking about the creep of VAR, I realise we're an hour and 7 minutes into this and we've not done any Star Wars references yet, which makes me a little uneasy, Kev.
You did two NBA ones in the first 15 minutes, so I thought we had to cool our jets after that for a while.
Look, without criticising your work, it's up to you to administer the show as you see fit. But it does remind me a little bit of Darth Vader on his way out of Cloud City, saying to Lando Calrissian, just pray I do not alter the deal any further.
Oh, what a reference.
And I kind of feel that that's the way it is with VAR at the moment. This is, no one's saying Embolo didn't dive, and it's a really weird part of the pitch to do it. Maybe
he tried, he just couldn't get there.
Yeah, he couldn't. He was on the floor too quickly. But I think a little bit like the Folarin Balogun thing. I think to say, well, right result, so all's good, I think is completely the wrong way of looking at it, because this overt, it's not even stealthy re-refereeing of football. I don't really see who benefits from that, to be honest. It's a really, really worrying trend, and there's so many elements of refereeing process and officiating process in this tournament that I'm feeling really strongly. I really hope this stays in this tournament and doesn't become part of football globally.
This is what I fear, that actually we are going to see it, become more and more of an issue. And I was very pro VAR at the start. I thought this is a great idea. If we can help the referees with technology, why wouldn't we do that? But I think what we've completely forgotten is the people in the actual stadium, the fans who've paid their money to go. I think it harms their experience. I think the delays, I mean, obviously this is a bit different because FIFA have generally been pretty quick with these VAR kind of interventions, but just generally, I think VAR spoils games.
Yeah, I just wonder though, when you say like that we're quite quick with these VAR interventions. I mean, what I think is always the interesting thing about World Cup, Kev, is watching football with people who don't normally watch football.
Yeah.
Like maybe members of your family or friends that don't watch football on a weekly basis, because the World Cup is for them just as much as it is for people like us who watch every available bit of football in the week. maybe even more so in a way. And what I found quite interesting is people who don't watch domestic football every single week, a lot of them, friends and family, have said to me, God, this takes ages, doesn't it? And like you're saying,
we're thinking it's not 10 minutes. Yay!
It's speeding it up. And there are so many elements of this. And I remember the first time I went to watch football in Turkey once they had some sort of intervention, and thinking, I can really live without, like, when it gets to like 8 minutes of stoppage time, I don't really care if it's right or it's wrong. I've got other things to do in my life. I want to cook. I want to read a book. I want to spend time with friends, all this sort of stuff. And I think that's it. It's just a creep on, and like modern football in many ways, in the fact that it encroaches on every single day, even outside the World Cup. It's a creep on people's time, isn't it, as well, really? This idea that it just annexes everything, which I don't think is great for the game.
Look at Andy Brassell making out he has a real life outside of football, when actually what he means is he wants to get on and watch the talkSPORT game as quickly as possible.
As well.
Yeah, indeed. Before we get to Argentina, I want to talk about Switzerland, because I was thinking about this today. There's been a lot of talk about golden generations with Belgium, with England, with other nations. I think we might have forgotten about Switzerland because, and of course, gold is quite important in Switzerland. You've got Granit Xhaka. You've got Manuel Akanji. Jan Sommer didn't retire that long ago from international football. Nico Elvedi, who people more widely might not know that well, but incredibly consistent defender for club and country. You've got young guys like Manzambi and Vargas coming through. This is a really talented group of players. We talked about Embolo, he blew it, but generally it's been very good for them, I would say, up top. And you've got guys like Vargas, like Manzambi. This is a real tick, I think, against the name of Swiss football. I think the fact that they have got to quarterfinals consistently, regularly qualified with no fuss, regularly got through group stages. This was not a given. This is not generally Switzerland's history. So the purple patch they've had with this group of players, I think has been pretty impressive.
Yeah, and there are loads of points at this World Cup where they could have moaned about their poor luck. They end up having to play one of their best midfielders at right back. They end up going the last couple of games when you play the best teams in the knockouts without Manzambi, who up until that point had looked fantastic. And I suspect we'll be talking about him a lot more over the days and weeks and months to come. And it really limited their ability to open up teams. I mean, the loss of Embolo was just the straw that broke the camel's back, really, wasn't it? Because they couldn't hold the ball up at that point. A bit like we were talking about with Morocco earlier, even though Morocco did have 11 men, it didn't feel like that sometimes. And all of a sudden, when Switzerland weren't able to do that, their defence comes under intolerable pressure. I mean, of all the players we've mentioned, and, Akanji will go on being great for them. It's a great partnership with Elvedi. They've got one of the best goalkeepers in the world in Gregor Kobel, whether he stays at Dortmund or whether he goes elsewhere next. So I think we can really underrate Switzerland and exactly how good they are and exactly how much talent they've got. And it would have been fascinating to see if this had remained 11 against 11. I think we could easily be talking about an England versus Switzerland semi-final.
But we are going to talk about an England-Argentina semi-final because I must admit, I covered the game against Jordan, which was their third and final group game. Wasn't an important game in terms of the fact that Argentina had already won the group. We knew that Jordan had been eliminated. But they made 9 changes and looked really good, Argentina still. Messi came on as a sub and scored a history-making goal, as it turned out. And I thought they looked really strong. They looked really good. Played Cape Verde, got taken to extra time. Played Egypt and had to really dig themselves out of a hole. Didn't look brilliant in this, I didn't think. They found a way after the Swiss went down to 10. Where are Argentina at for you? Because I guess it's one of those things, we can criticise individual displays and certain games and what have you. But these are winners. I mean, they've won the World Cup under Scaloni. They've won the Copa America twice. They know how to navigate their way through a tournament.
They do, and I think that is really what has kept them going so far, that level of experience. Because I think if you look at them now, you think they haven't changed enough since 3.5 years ago. There are some old boys in there, some of whom have gone past their best. Even the best has gone past his best. His best is still excellent, of course, but
he's still pretty good.
Yeah, it's fair to say, but they have to play a certain way to carry him, just as they did 3.5 years ago. And I think the players around him are a little less able to do that, even though the atmosphere that I found around Argentina when I was out there and had a little bit of time around them, I don't think Messi has ever enjoyed himself this much. And I think the players around him are enjoying being with him so much. Whereas there was this edge, this sense of we have to get it done for Leo 3.5 years ago. Now, as Scaloni has said, now we've taken the rucksack off our back. They're not carrying that weight anymore. It does feel as if they're still defending champions, so you can't exactly say they're playing with house money, but they're having a really good time and seeing how far they can take it. I do think, though, as you say, they've been deeply unimpressive in the knockouts, and a bit of grit, a bit of luck, and a bit of individual quality has seen them through just about. They will find England are an enormous step up from what they have faced so far in the knockouts. And England are ready to sweat and battle and grind it out as well. So I think they'll find that a bit of a shock too. So I think the thing that concerns me the most, if I was looking at it from an Argentina perspective, is since the team has settled down in the knockouts, you're back to two fullbacks who weren't really playing much for their clubs in the back half of last season and are not at their best at the moment. You're looking at a midfield that leans a lot on Enzo and Alexis McAllister, two players who they lean really hard on. And then you're looking at Messi or latterly Julian Alvarez or Lautaro to pull a rabbit from a hat, really.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see whether Argentina can find their A game for that semi-final against England. Of course, you'll hear every single kick right here with us on talkSPORT. Coming up, we're going to talk about the demise of German football. I might not want to, given my German loyalties, but I'm contractually obliged.
We all expected, okay, we need to beat Croatia by 3 goals. We need to go and beat Ghana by 3, and then we should beat Panama by 5. We should beat Congo by 5. What's it like in a tournament? It's not always the case, is it?
No, definitely not. It's funny when I see, the betting, things, before the game, and I'm thinking this is not what we expect, on the pitch. I know that England are favorite against Norway, but when you look at Norway, they look really, really strong, as a unit, as a team. Of course, they have weakness, but England must be aware that if they don't get the position of the ball in this game, and this is where I agree with Troy Deeney, for example. I think with the player they have, England, they should be more confident with the ball. They should show more commitment with the ball, and composure as well. And this is where, something is missing.
Yeah. Well, we shall see if we can show that. I mean, if you look, on paper.
I'm just sorry to disturb you, Jeff, but for this game, England against Norway, I'm just wondering if Norway get the ball, is it what England wants into this game? Waiting, sit back, trying to play in counter-attack, or try to get the ball, the position of the ball, and try to conduct and manage, this game. So this is for me one of the key of this game.
Yeah.
How you going to react with the ball and without the ball?
I mean, it's interesting because Norway had a lot more possession of the ball against Brazil than most people had imagined they would do.
Although the tactics from Ancelotti, though, did he say leave them with it?
Yeah.
I don't think we should do that. I think we should go after them. I really do.
Yeah, pressure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Text from Ryan. He said, Bellingham's been very good, but I think Arsenal's Morgan Rogers should get a chance in the next game. Ryan, dream on.
130 million, please.
Yeah, Bruno Guimaraes is going there.
Cash.
I just don't see...
You're listening to Trans Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassell. We're going to take a look at some of the big hitters who really fell flat in the World Cup in the next half hour or so. We're going to start with Germany. They were beaten on penalties by Paraguay. I was lucky enough to be covering that one for talkSPORT. It was an extraordinary tie, really. And Andy, Julian Nagelsmann, the coach who went into this World Cup with Germany, has gone. He didn't want to go, but he resigned in the end after they came to an agreement financially. Jurgen Klopp set to take the role. I think we always knew, didn't we, that Jurgen Klopp was going to be the Germany coach at some stage. My feeling was that Nagelsmann would have done enough with Germany at this World Cup to probably keep his contract until the Euros, which is what was expected. But he's gone, and Klopp is expected to take Germany into the Euros and the 2030 World Cup. We'll come to Klopp in a minute, but I want to ask you about Nagelsmann because he's a guy that I have a huge amount of respect for. He's been a Bundesliga coach since he was 28, youngest ever Bundesliga coach. Clearly a guy who's very smart. However, at Bayern, some of the relationships didn't quite work out with the leading players, and he ended up getting sacked. And with Germany, even though they did well at the Euros and pushed Spain all the way in the quarters, ultimately this has ended badly too. Where is his stock at? Because he's consistently linked with Premier League jobs. Where is he at right now, reputationally?
Well, on one hand, we could say, fine, because he's free, he's available. And I'm sure there'll be clubs out there, particularly when it gets to October, November, all over Europe, who would love to have him. And I also think it's worth pointing out that Hansi Flick, who has been one of the outstanding coaches in Europe, was basically marched out of the building in disgrace. Well, the hotel next to the main train station in Wolfsburg after they'd lost 4-1 in a friendly to Japan, where he played Nico Schlotterbeck at left back.
Yeah.
And he's gone from strength to strength. So what you were saying earlier when we were talking about De La Fuente and Southgate, like there is no comparison at the moment, especially at the moment, less than ever before, between being an international coach and being a successful club coach. However, I think what's notable about Nagelsmann and how he's kind of been hoisted by his own petard a little bit. One of his famous quotes, his most famous quote, is the one about coaching being 15% tactics and 85% social competence. And
he's got the 15.
Yes. Ever since, he seems to have been tripping over his skateboard to make social faux pas, really. And that's really the concern. Because tactically, you can say what you like about Germany this World Cup. I think there are holes to be picked, but really the biggest holes to be picked are in his human management of the squad. Everything from the return of Manuel Neuer, which was unnecessary and unsuccessful, and the way he handled that, by the way, and the way he handled Oliver Baumann, who's the previous #1 goalkeeper, that was an absolute embarrassment.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, tearing a strip off Dennis Undav and sort of almost rubbishing him in public when he's the guy who's most likely to score you a goal at this World Cup. And they were all just really symptomatic of the way you don't coach big players. Now, when you were saying where is his stock, to boil it down to your actual question, I think that's why it has to be a question. Because of what happens at Bayern and what happens at big players, whatever you think is Germany's natural level at this very moment. And it's why Klopp feels like such a massive upgrade, because of the way that he has managed it on a level of personalities, on a level of respect, on a level of courtesy. If you're in charge of a big club, you must be sitting there thinking, does this guy really know how to relate to the biggest players? We know he can do it tactically, but so much of it is personality management. And is he able to do that at the elite level? And I think it's a valid question.
Yeah, you don't want him to end up being a luxury Domenico Tedesco, who's got all the theory, but just can't handle people and just makes faux pas after faux pas. And I think that's the fear. I'm still a big fan of Nagelsmann's, but I think he has made serious errors. I totally agree about not only the Manuel Neuer situation and a different Dennis Undav situation, in the sense that he'd made a big play of saying, this is my closer, this is my guy who can come on and change a game. And then he starts him against Paraguay and completely loses his effectiveness. It just didn't work at all. So, and he left Musiala on the bench. So some very odd decisions, very inconsistent approach to things as well. And you've already alluded to the fact that therefore Klopp has an open goal, really. And I think he does. I think this is perfect for Jurgen Klopp, because what he didn't want was the day-to-day. He didn't want that cloying pressure of being a club coach anymore at the top level. He made that quite plain when he left Liverpool. And I think this was the only job he was going to come away from that Red Bull position for, because he is enormously popular in Germany. I think he's made himself even more so with his punditry on Magenta. I think he's done a great job on that. And this is a guy who has the personality to get the best out of these players. I think the other thing as well is that there is an identity crisis with the national team. And whether you like it or not, whether you agree it's the way forward or not, he will have a way of playing. And he is absolutely going to stick to it. Now, whether that's a fit for his players, we'll see. But this is going to be high energy. This is going to be passion. This is going to be full gas football. This is what he does.
But I agree. But I honestly think the tactics are an even smaller part of it at international level, because you don't get the time to drill the players. So what he's able to do with them on a human level, I think, is the most important thing. Look, Jurgen Klopp is an underrated tactician. I think for someone that we know is a great coach / manager, I think people look at the personality and sometimes a little bit like Carlo Ancelotti.
Exactly
that. Very
That's
different
exactly
type
what I
of
was going to
person.
say, yeah.
Yeah, they think it's all about, you know, but being able to relate to the biggest stars. Look, that is super important as well. And it's more important at international level. But I do think to flip it back to you a second, Kevin, I do agree it's the perfect fit. It's the only guy really who could have moved towards getting Germany in a better place than they are at the moment. But as you know, I don't need to tell you this, but there's been so much discussion in Germany in recent years about following that reset, going back to the start of the 21st century. Germany starts producing very different players. Ultimately, that creates a position where they're able to go on and win World Cup 2014 with Mario Götze, who's, you know, maybe the most talented of that generation, coming on and scoring a brilliant winner. But I just wonder, right, because there's been this discussion in recent times about, are we producing the right sort of footballer? Have we lost what made us so feared and so hated and so hard to beat in international football? You know, I'm not just talking about the previous stars. I'm not talking about Rudi Völler or Michael Ballack, but I'm really thinking about guys like Andy Möller, Stefan Effenberg,
the guys you hated playing, right?
Lothar Matthäus, like players like that. And as you were saying with Bellingham, they don't really have that kind of personality, and that's been a real discussion in German football. And what we do know is Klopp can fix a lot of things, but he can't fix that in the short term, can he?
No, he can't. I think he can drag a little bit more personality out of some of the players he has. I mean, funnily enough, I know Kimmich is seen as this kind of scrappy-do figure because he is small. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he's the ultimate scrappy-do. For those of a certain age, you remember that cartoon dog.
I like Kimmich more than him.
He can only do so much, right? He can only do so much. You know, he is the kind of guy I think Klopp wants, in the sense that those guys that do play with their heart on the sleeve, those guys that are visibly upset when it goes wrong because they care so much. Now, I'm not saying players don't care per se, but you do need to amp it up, and it's all a bit nice. Wirtz is a wonderful player, one of my favourite players in the sport, no doubt about it. But you've got him, Musiala, Havertz, and maybe, rightly or wrongly, for me, when it all coalesces, they're not nasty. It's not a nasty team. It's not like a real... You look in that Argentina team, you look in, even in the French team, or, there'll be guys who are a bit nasty. They'll do what it takes to win. I don't think Germany have got that. Rudiger's got... They don't,
and it creates an issue, doesn't it? Because you look at this tournament, for example, and you look at, say, Antonio Rudiger. The only reason he's there because of his personality, isn't it? Because the form simply doesn't justify it at the moment.
No, there were too many who are just very, very technically good footballers who I don't think have developed that streak in them that you really need if you're going to succeed at this level. Because that 2014 squad certainly had a lot of guys like that, and this current one certainly does not. We're going to take a look at another big hitter that failed after the break. We're going to look at Portugal on Trans-Europe Express.
Are France that good, or have they been tested yet?
I think probably a little bit of both. I think they are that good. I think they are, because they showed second half what they can do in tight spaces and but I think there needs to be a moment where they will inevitably come up, probably against Spain, hopefully against England, where with their teams, more danger lies ahead. But they kind of, I think it was quite simple for France today.
Mate, they're coasting to the semi-final of the World Cup.
Yeah. Well, they're a good side though. They're a good side. They've got the best player in the world.
Do you know what I like about France? And it's a bit of a throwback. The forwards, when they get the ball, you see a lot of players, number 10s or midfielders, they'll get it and they'll pass it out wide and they'll come back and they'll go out the other side and then you might try and get to the byline. When France win the ball, they stick it into the front three or front four, and they run at you like through the middle of the park. And they just drive with the ball, a bit like what Gaza used to do. And then the game just opens up. And you're looking at it going, as a defender, I'm watching the Moroccans, they're going, how do you defend that? Well, you've got three people running off the ball, and then you've got the player with the ball running at you, straight at you. The second goal they score is just like them just going, well I'm just going to run through you.
Well, it was 2-0.
Hard to defend again.
It could have been 4 if Mbappe scores that. JP had a chance at the end there, and brilliant, gets got on his left foot and then scuffs his shot. And in the end, it was comfortable for France. They really didn't break a sweat. I don't remember their keeper having anything to do at all. There might have been a couple of crosses. I don't remember it. But, yeah, they're that good, mate. And I think they've got a little bit of a fear factor about them because everyone knows how good they are going forward. You cannot allow their 2 wide men to run at your fullback 1v1. You can't allow Elise.
You're listening to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard sitting in for Danny tonight, and alongside Andy Brassell. We've talked about Germany and their failure at the World Cup finals. We're going to have a look at Portugal now. Disappointing performance against Spain. They never really got going. Yes, they only lost 1-0 to a late Mikel Merino goal. But Andy, ultimately, I put this in the bracket of their performance at the Euros because it was the same pattern. Roberto Martinez, who has now gone as coach, hitched the wagon to Cristiano Ronaldo, and Ronaldo drove the wagon into the river. And now Martinez is sinking with it. It just wasn't good enough from either Ronaldo or the team in general. And I know he's been one of the greatest players of his generation. Of course, that's true. You look at what he's won, you look at what he's achieved, you look at the longevity. Do not get me wrong. Cristiano Ronaldo is clearly one of the greats of his generation. However, there is no doubt in my mind that if they'd been a bit more sparing with him at the Euros and at this tournament, I think they'd have got a better result.
They might have done. But I just think, even though it was flawed starting Cristiano Ronaldo, and I wouldn't argue against that for a minute, and I've seen a heck of a lot of him at close quarters over the years, especially with Portugal. And, you know, the reality is he hasn't fallen off a cliff in the last 2 years. It's been coming for a long time. And I think the numbers that he's got and what he's achieved since he's over 30, given that, you know, he was a shadow of himself at the 2014 World Cup. And despite the 3-in-a-row Champions Leagues with Real Madrid, he's never quite the same player after 2014. Now, we talk about how Messi, for example, how Argentina and Scaloni have very successfully created a system where he doesn't have to do much running and he can just do the good stuff in a very limited space of the pitch. And they have done that brilliantly. But actually, Portugal did that for Cristiano Ronaldo back in 2016, which simultaneously demolishes the argument that he's just fallen off in the last year or two, and sort of really shows that with the right coaching, you could still get a decent whack out of the rest of the team. Because I think if you look at it player for player, the team that won Euro 2016 is far inferior to their current set of players. Yeah. It's not even close.
Eder got the winner.
Yeah. Look, I love João Moutinho as much as the next man, but come on. That team is nowhere near player for player, the current thing. And, you know, there's so much discussion of Ronaldo and Ronaldo's legacy and all this sort of stuff and him being able to choose his own out. But what about the legacy of Bruno Fernandes? What about the legacy of Bernardo Silva? Because as you say, Kev, quite rightly, they have basically wasted the last two major championships. The major championships, by the way, in this World Cup and Euro 2024, in which two of the best players, not just of this Portugal generation, but of any Portugal generation, they've basically had their peaks wasted, which I think is a terrible shame. Now, look, I think a lot of the stuff that people say about Roberto Martinez, like, he wasted a golden generation in Belgium. I think that's nonsense, because he got them to the brink of the World Cup in 2018, and a lot of it was his very good coaching. He got them close. They didn't have such a good team that they had a right to win it, but they got themselves in the position where they could have won it, which I think is all you can really ask for at a tournament, and then, you know, let the fates do what they will to an extent. But what I think really does weigh on Martinez, you take away Cristiano Ronaldo and how ineffective all those excellent players were for Portugal. It has to lie on him. The fact that I went to 2 of their games while I was out in Texas, and most of it, you would have needed binoculars if you were the opposition goalkeeper to see Bruno Fernandes, because he's so far away from the goal. This is a guy who was, you know, the player of the year in the Premier League and so useful for Manchester United. Bernardo Silva, who can be useful to you in so many different ways. The bottom line is they just, and Vitinha was, you know, just like so below his level as well. This has to lie on the coach, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a huge black mark against his reputation. I agree with you with the Belgium situation. I think actually he did a pretty good job. And that World Cup in 2018 was a really good campaign, and they got beaten by a France team that went on to win it. So it is what it is. But yeah, it just one tournament. Okay, you can, and I know people will say, well, hang on, he won the Nations League in the middle of it. That's fine. But in terms of the major tournaments, you know, you look at Euro 2024, 120 minutes against Slovenia, didn't score a goal. Ronaldo played the whole lot. 120 minutes against France, Ronaldo played the whole lot. They didn't score a goal. And then you look at this game, 90 plus minutes against Spain, Ronaldo plays the whole lot. They don't score. I know it sounds like I've got it in for Cristiano Ronaldo, but I think it's a mix of things. I feel, and I've always felt actually, when he's in the team, Fernandes becomes more deferential. And he's not the player that he normally would be. And you've got Gonzalo Ramos.
But he wasn't in World Cup 2022. Like, it was demonstrably Bruno Fernandes' team.
Yeah.
And he was happy to take the ball by the horns, and he was able to do that. But, you know, there are other elements in play. And I think when you look at, say, the substitutions they made against Democratic Republic of Congo, when they're creating nothing, and they bring on substitutes which end up with Bruno Fernandes being further and further away from goal. And that, to me, is just, it's absurd.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to,
really, isn't it?
whatever your team is, at whatever level, you've got to make it work around your best player. And we all know who Portugal's best player is right now, and it's not Cristiano Ronaldo.
So Jorge Jesus is taking over, hugely experienced, takes no messing whatsoever. This is going to be fun.
It is going to be, it should be fun. I mean, what I particularly liked at the press conference is they had, you know, when now they get these XXXL shirts with like your contract expiry date on the back. They put on the back of the shirt where the name is, "We came to win," and it says 26 to 30. So like Klopp, we know he's in for the long haul for the 2030 World Cup as well, which of course Portugal will be co-hosting, and hopefully Cristiano Ronaldo won't be in the starting lineup by then, although you can never rule it out.
I would not put it past him.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that obviously has made a lot of people's ears perk up. The fact that Jorge Jesus did not rule out Cristiano Ronaldo staying on and basically said he can pick his own exit date. On the other hand, we could say that he sort of pushed Neymar off and out of the Saudi Pro League, basically, when he realised he physically wasn't up to it.
With a pretty big shove as well. He didn't mess about, did he, with that?
Yeah, totally. So it'll be interesting to see how he does that. Now, as well, when we talk about having time with the players, I think this is a really interesting question when it comes to Jorge Jesus, because he is someone who plays exciting, attacking, enterprising football, and has done that in Portugal. He's done it with Benfica. He's done it in Brazil with Flamengo. He's done it in Saudi. Is he able to do that with Portugal with the time he's got with them? Now, what we saw with Roberto Martinez is we often talk about the difference between England in qualifying off and final tournaments, or we did until pre-Southgate, I suppose. Whereas I think that's been a huge problem for Portugal under Martinez. It's been easy to look at them in qualifying and thinking, oh, they're completely unloading on it, everyone. You know, this is an attacking team that are really exciting. He's getting all the right bits to click together. And then it comes to the tournament and they look like they've never seen a goal before. You know, really. So I think closing that gap is absolutely integral for Jorge Jesus. But what is clear is because he's an old guy and because he's 71 years old and because he's been out of Portugal for a while now, the football is going to have to be good from the get-go. Because the other thing about him is, and I hate to say this because I always really loved his football and I love watching his teams, some of the views about society that he's started to bring forth over the last couple of years, I could really do without, to be perfectly honest. And people in Portugal, I think, will really kick back against that if there's the slightest reason to.
Yeah, he's certainly somebody who's very forthright in his views. And certainly that will cause lots of debate in Portuguese, not just Portuguese football, I would think, beyond that as well, if he carries on with the kind of views that he's been espousing of late. Fascinating to see what happens after the break on Trans-Europe Express. We're going to ask what's next for the USA.
they get into this weird situation where they forget what happened before. So all the big games, they played Havertz, right? Gyökeres, who you bought in at the start of the season, was going to be, for all the big games, in all the big games, he was on the bench.
Yeah.
Facts, that's what happened. So the manager doesn't trust him. That's not our opinion, that's just objectively looking at it. Havertz gets injured quite a lot, unfortunately. Gary Jesus is not the same since he's come back from his injury. So if you're now telling me that you can get through this season again and everybody else is going to be as poor as they were last year, I think you're just forgetting the fact that you lot were all losing your marbles around the Man City loss. And it was, we need a proper striker. Arteta don't know what he's doing again. You win the league, it's great, we're going to win it.
But what I've always said to I've always said to you, I always said to him, though, Gyökeres wasn't bought in for the big games, did I? I said that to you. We bought Gyökeres in for the game.
No, I get
listen,
explain.
I want to hear
the year before, Arsenal, it weren't the record against Man City's, the Liverpool, it weren't that cost us the league. It was we couldn't beat Fulham, couldn't beat West Ham, couldn't beat them lesser clubs. Gyökeres, I mean, he said it. Right, it's one of them. Gyökeres this season, though, Gyökeres this season scored against the Fulhams, the West Ham, so we didn't have a problem getting past those teams, which is why then we went on to win the league.
Okay, I think you won the league because you played very pragmatic football. I'm not actually allowed to say the type of football that people are calling it on air, but you played a certain type of football.
Would you play that type of football to win the league?
No.
What?
What are you talking? Of course you would.
Honestly.
If I was a footballer.
No, it's just like...
my team.
Yeah.
No, I'll be happy like you lot. I'll be exactly... You get me? I'll be happy. Of course I will. But
would you like to see Spurs play that way to win?
Brendan Johnson scored with like his knee or something and we won the trophy. I'm happy. I don't care, bro. However it gets done, I'm happy. I don't really care. But what I'm saying is, you can't like gloat about it and say, we don't need a 9. That's crazy. You do need a 9, respectfully. What are you talking about, bro? If you sold Osimhen and Havertz right now, you could... sorry, Osimhen. If you bought Osimhen and sold Gyökeres and Havertz right now, you'd be great. You'd be fine. You could buy Barcola. Barcola and Osimhen changes their team, bro. Surely.
Do you know what? I'm happy with what we got.
Oh, you're a liar. That's a lie. You're a liar. That is a lie.
I'm happy with
that. Is a
You're listening to Trans-Europe Express on talkSPORT, and we're going to take a look now at the USA's campaign. Of course, they managed to get to the knockout rounds. They beat Bosnia-Herzegovina in their first knockout game, but then were mauled by Belgium 4-1 in the end. Delighted to say. Brian, great to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Let's start with the campaign as a whole. We'll dig into the detail in a moment, but they got to the last 16. Where was that in terms of your expectations, in terms of overall US media expectations, do you think? About par, or maybe did they do a little better than expected or a little worse?
I mean, I think it's, kind of around where they could have done, but I think everyone wanted to see a little bit more. I mean, they've gone to the round of 16 most World Cups since 1994. So they made, in 30 years, they're still stuck at the same stage from the last time they hosted the tournament. Different tournament. They've still had to win a knockout round to get here. That's all good. But, in terms of being able now to crack playing against those top 10 teams in the world, they're still a little bit behind. And I think everyone was kind of hoping that they would be, a little further along.
How much did the fuss over the Balogun red card and suspension, not suspension, affect the game against Belgium? Because what I found was interesting is from outside the United States or outside US soccer circles, it certainly felt that a lot of neutrals and fans and media from other countries strongly felt that the US were favourites going into that game. Brian, so what do you think it was? Do you think it was the Balogun thing? Do you think it was increased expectation, a combination of those factors?
Yeah, it was a combination of factors. I think Belgium, they used the age and their wisdom to their benefit. They were just smarter. They could handle the moment. The U.S. team looked lost in the moment. You have to remember they lost 5-2 against Belgium just a couple months before in the March friendly. So there really was no change. But if anything about the Balogun story, I think it kind of backfired. I think it probably gave Belgium
just lost Brian there for a moment. I think it's interesting, Andy, isn't it? Because we're going to talk a little bit more about the Balogun situation when we look in depth at what's happened with FIFA in this tournament and what their credibility is like at the moment. But what I think is a shame is that we ended up talking about that situation rather than the positivity of the US charge, because that's what it had been up until that point, that Mauricio Pochettino had been able to get the best out of this group of players. They played his football with and without the ball in terms of activity, in terms of real passion.
Yeah.
And that was the big question mark coming into it, wasn't it? Could he get this group of players that had a bit of reputation for not really being able to give of their best? And he'd been able to actually get them dancing to his tune.
And it felt to me, Kev, like Mauricio Pochettino really needed this tournament, and he really needed the US to be good at this tournament, because whether he continues or not, if we're looking about his future job prospects, it's gone a bit sideways for him in recent years. I think his career has not turned out how a lot of people would have expected it to turn out since he left Tottenham. And certainly since he was in his pomp at Tottenham. Really, the past 6 or 7 years have been like quite challenging ones in many ways for Pochettino. So to see him have such a positive effect, I felt that group stage, you thought, actually, he's maybe parlaying himself back into the frame for other big jobs coming down the line, which is obviously important for him. Whether he stays or not now, I don't think he's going to be in charge of the US forever, and I don't think that's probably not a desire on either side. But you're right that the feeling around them coming out of those group games was just excellent. And we have to say as well, Kev, Balogun has been a huge part of that. I mean, bearing in mind that at the start of the tournament, my big concern over the US was really with Christian Pulisic not really fit, not really functioning, not having scored a club goal since December 28, and he really needed that goal in the friendly the week and a half before. How are they going to be able to do something? And Balogun was like, okay, hold my beer. Now, obviously, he was the inverse of that. He was in really great form for Monaco in the back half of last season, which has transformed his reputation, which has transformed his prospects on the transfer market, because obviously Monaco have been looking to sell him for a while now. They need to bring in some money this summer, and he's one of the main ones they want to put on the market. So I think to have a situation where if look, this is from the outside, and Brian might feel completely differently about this, but I think in terms of how you feel about the US now rather than going into the tournament, it feels like a lot of good came out of it. And the fact that they don't have to lean on Pulisic to make things happen and someone else can be the guy for them feels pretty good, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think there's definitely positives. I think the Pulisic thing's really unfortunate because we know through the second half of his season with Milan, yes, he was in poor form, but he had a lot of injury problems. Max Allegri had gone into full murder ball mode in the final weeks of the season as he tried to rescue the campaign, and they went from title contenders to falling out of the Champions League race entirely. So I think it was harsh. I don't think he did himself any favours resting from the Gold Cup. I think that went down like a lead balloon with a lot of former players and with a lot of USA fans. But he did get a lot of stick for that. I guess the big question, Andy, really, for me, there's always this talk whenever USA are in a World Cup, and whether they do well or whether they don't, there's always this talk about, well, it's a minority sport in the sense that we've got the NBA, another NBA reference. We've got NFL. We've got ice hockey. We've got, the big hitter sports. We've got baseball. The argument among some is always, well, if all our best athletes played football, we'd win the World Cup within 8 to 12 years. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. That's not how it works. It's not all about speed or strength or whatever. This is about technique and culture. That gap to me feels like it's still massive between them and the real big hitters like a Spain or a France or an Argentina.
Yeah, look, I want to keep a bit of distance between myself and describing US soccer's problems or disadvantages, because honestly, I don't know enough about it. But from the outside, I think what is clear from the discussions that have happened in the light of their exit, clearly there's an issue in terms of public funding, in terms of like people having to pay to play, which obviously excludes a lot of the athletic population.
It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem.
I mean, that is an insurmountable problem, really, isn't it? And I think the other thing is, like, I love US sports, as you know, absolutely love US sports. But it is a closed culture to a certain degree. And, you know, there is a sense that we've got everything we need sports-wise here. And what do you need most, really, in this modern world of football/soccer to succeed? You need to be able to be globally facing. And that is something really that I think has really helped. I think it's really helped. We talked about England and Germany and how they've changed the way they produce players. That's by being more international. That's by being more open, really, from the countries that have basically been self-sufficient football-wise for the vast majority of their history. But by the way, I do have to tell you, when we're talking about resistance to other cultures, I was with the talkSPORT crew in Houston, and we went to see the Houston Astros. And there was this amazing bit, like the USA had won earlier that day, and there was this group of lads who were at the back of one of the stands, and they were celebrating the USA victory, presumably after a few refreshments, by removing their shirts and like swinging them around their head, and going, USA, USA. And the stewards moved in. What Stuart Pearce did, and tried to encourage us to. There was a rather less take-up amongst the production team, it has to be said. And I think Stuart obviously drew the line at the USA chance. But it was quite interesting because the stewards moved in to say, well, I'm not sure you should be doing this at baseball, like supporting soccer.
Certainly not.
And obviously, the stewards marching in to try and stop these people made more other people join them. So really, you had like 200 people, 300 people in the end, like swinging their shirts around their head, going, USA, USA. It was good.
Always the way. Plenty still to come on Trans Europe Express. Go to Ben. He's Arsenal fan. All right, Ben?
Benny boy.
How you doing? You all right?
I'm all right, Ben. We've got to do this quarter-final 11. Let's get it going. Come on.
All right. I've got the Spanish flamenco dance on the wing. Like around defence. Their foot tapping or dazzle their defence and send them sideways.
Yeah, the old flamenco dance.
And
Dance
a little maverick on the wing. Little maverick on the wing.
Yeah, like a flamenco dance.
Yeah.
What do they call it? Is it flamenco or is it what is it? Flamenco.
Madame won't wait for you.
It's a flamenco.
Yeah.
Flamenco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know you're iconic now, Ben?
No,
Yeah. Yeah.
He's actually iconic.
Ben appears every single night at the sports bar.
Every night.
Doesn't he?
Without foul.
Yeah. Yeah. Been over a year.
It's been a year. All right, look, the flamenco dancer on the wing.
Yeah.
Okay, dancing about. Bit of maverick in there. All right, let's go to Dave. He's a Sunderland fan. Dave?
All right, Dave-o.
Hello, boys. How you doing?
I'm all right, Dave. How are you?
Yeah.
Good. Good. So I'm getting in early with a representative from England who I think can be our captain.
Okay.
And it's St. George himself.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a leader, warrior. He's up for a battle. He'll put the opposition to the sword. And I think we can play him on the wing.
No, we don't feel like a winger, mate.
Killed a dragon.
Well,
Centre half.
Killed a dragon, didn't he?
Reason being, he's got a good cross, hasn't he, St. George?
Okay.
No,
I feel like as
The story of England's World Cup win in 1966 is the stuff of legend. Pickles and a lost trophy, World Cup Willie, they think it's all over. They couldn't have done it without the skills and goals of Sir Geoff Hurst. But his World Cup journey wasn't always plain sailing. But for a freak injury in the group stages in 1966, we may have never been speaking about Sir Geoff Hurst in the same way. He got the call after Jimmy Greaves had his leg sliced open against France in the final group match. Hurst got off to a flying start in the knockouts, literally, scoring the winner against Argentina 12 minutes from time in the quarter-final. He didn't score in the semis against Portugal, but his influence on the game was massive. When Greavesy was past fit for the final, though, the public and the press wanted their main man back in. Sir Alf Ramsey stuck with Hurst, and the rest, well, you know. His heroics prompted parties on the streets. Once the celebrations had died down, England started preparing to defend the trophy. And just look at their record between 66 and 70. Only 4 losses in 36 games. But when 70 came around, fate played a mean trick on Hurst. In the quarter-final against the Germans, Hurst scored a legitimate goal in extra time that was disallowed. And England lost. Basically the exact opposite of the 1966 World Cup final. With that, Sir Geoff's pretty short World Cup career came to an end. When you look at his stats, they aren't massively impressive. But when you consider 3 of his 5 goals came on that glorious afternoon at Wembley, it's not a bad trade-off. What you might not know about Sir Geoff, though, is that after retiring, he didn't stay in football. I mean, he tried, oh yes, but he packed in management after 2 years and later worked in insurance because he couldn't afford his mortgage. I mean, can you imagine Harry Kane in insurance nowadays? Yes, Sir Geoff may have only played in 2 World Cups, but crucially, he helped bring one of them home. Jules Rimet, still gleaming.
You're listening to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassell. Halfway through a humongous 4-hour show. We've got half an hour of Tim Vickery goodness coming up. Our favourite South American football expert will be joining us for the next couple of sections. We're also going to look later in the hour at whether FIFA's credibility has taken a big hit during this World Cup, and who should Premier League teams be looking at after this World Cup. Who could they bring in ahead of next season? It's all coming up on Trans-Europe Express. So it's time for one of my favourite bits of the show, when we get the wisdom of our South American football expert, Tim Vickery. Tim, wonderful to be joined by you. It's been an extraordinary World Cup and you've been a very busy man.
Yeah, I certainly have. Yeah, and I want to test something on the pair of you. It's a kind of generational test. Obviously, everyone, the focus is all on this huge game on Wednesday. But if I tell you that the first semi-final on Tuesday is the Flashing Blade derby, does that make any sense to you?
Flashing a different. Oh, Zorro is the Flashing Blade, is he not? No, I failed.
No,
I failed the test.
You're just too damn young. That's the problem with you folks.
Alas.
It was big for my generation. It was like 60s, early 70s, something like that. On might have been BBC. It was like a kind of half-hour thing that they bought in. It was a French production. and it had a fabulous theme music. It's right to fight for all you want, for all that you believe. It's great. And it featured the 17th century or 18th century war between France and Spain. So it is the Flashing Blade Derby. But I'm very, very sad that no one of a reasonable age seems to understand what I'm saying when I go on about it.
We've let you down there. We've really let you down, I feel.
You have, yeah. You can see that a whole month of this is taking a toll mentally. But onwards and sideways.
Tim, it's been wonderful watching and listening to you throughout the tournament, and a lot of the focus has been on Brazil. We are going to talk about Argentina later, of course, ahead of that semi-final against England, but we spoke a lot in the build-up to the tournament about Brazil, about Ancelotti, about Neymar, and in the end, I'm guessing the reaction in Brazil to their premature exit really has been, pretty negative, I would have thought.
Oh God, it's a huge. I mean, to go out to a side without any real World Cup tradition like Norway, not even reaching the quarterfinals, it's an unmitigated disaster, and the country is tearing itself apart at the moment on the issue of Neymar. And we talked about this so much, and I had thought that Ancelotti was doing a masterclass here. I really had, because when he called him up, the vibe that I got from it is, this is all a circus, but I'm the ringmaster. I can control all of this that's going on. Because the Neymar thing is a sect. It really is. I've watched a lot of him this year, every time, in the hope that there would be something there, something reminding us of the player before the serious knee injury in October of 23. Never saw it. And then when he was called up, and Ancelotti said, well, he's got a little while to improve his physical condition. And then we found out that Santos had hidden this, it seems, that he was injured and he was going to be spending all of that time just recuperating. And he comes on against Scotland and he looks like a long retired player who's kind of waddled on for a charity match. And you're thinking, that's it. Ancelotti has given them what they want. He's got Neymar inside the tent, so he's not going to be used by the crowd as a stick to beat the team with. But you're not going to see him again unless it's a game that Brazil are winning easily, or it's the Hail Mary last 10 minutes because he can take a good corner, good set piece. But to bring him on halfway through the second half, it just made absolutely no sense. And it destructured the entire side in not a very glamorous way, in a way that where Brazil was saying to Norway, you can have the ball. Brazil had kind of controlled the game. And the clear opportunities had been theirs. There's obviously the penalty with Bruno Guimaraes, strange choice to take the penalty. And then there's the one-on-one with Endrick and the keeper, where Endrick puts it wide. Either of those go in, and it's a different game. And from the moment that Neymar comes on, Neymar can only play centrally. Ancelotti's very clear about this because he can't come back. The wide men have to come back. So Neymar comes on centrally. Vinny and Endrick have to move wider, away from the goal where you don't want them. You lose the press from the front. You lose the marking down the Brazil right, the Norwegian left, because you've taken Hayan off. And at last, Norway are able to get the ball in quality to Haaland. And Haaland doesn't need very much to do to take the game away from Brazil. But it all comes down to an absolutely disastrous substitution. I never thought that, and loads of ex-players here have been part of this Neymar sect. Never thought that Ancelotti would be. I'm still trying to work out what on earth was going on in his head, because that one substitution destructured his side and presented the game on a plate to Norway. So the whole country is tearing itself a little bit apart on the Neymar issue. There are some saying, well, the problem was that he should have started. Who on earth? I demand the names and addresses of these people. And then our old friend, Andy B, Jorge Jesus, who's just been named the coach of Portugal, in his opening press conference, he has really put the nail in the coffin of this debate. Because remember, Jorge Jesus was Neymar's coach in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
And they could only register 15 only 15 foreign players for the Saudi league, and he wouldn't register Neymar, wouldn't register him. That's why Neymar came back to Santos, because Jorge Jesus was saying, look, you're not fit enough. So Jorge Jesus there, he's being asked the question about Cristiano Ronaldo and putting the individual ahead of the team and so on. And he's able to point to his own career. And he says, using one Portuguese word and one English, he said, he's coached 2 of the big 3 of recent years. He's never coached Messi. He's coached Cristiano, and he's coached Neymar. And he had the stones to go up to Neymar and say, "Tu finish." Tu finish has now entered the football lexicon of Brazil. And it's difficult to see where this debate going. And there are even some people saying, please, Neymar, please try and save us again in 2030. The flight from logic here is absolutely extraordinary. But it's not really Neymar's fault. It's Ancelotti's fault for putting him on when the game was in the balance. And I will never understand.
In a World Cup that has been based so much around the cult of personality for better or worse, it was interesting because we touched on this earlier and elsewhere in that press conference, in that introductory press conference. Jorge Jesus pretty much made it clear that I'm not going to force Cristiano Ronaldo out of the team. It's up to him to decide his exit plan. He's one of the greatest, etc. Do you think that there could be a short-term job swap where Jorge Jesus comes back to Brazil to get rid of Neymar definitively from the national team, and Ancelotti goes and does the same for Ronaldo?
Well, it's a conspiracy theory, but there may well be something in it. And Jorge Jesus would have been a more popular choice than Ancelotti to take charge of Brazil because of the just magical 2019 that he had with Flamengo. And there are whispers, loud whispers, shouting whispers, if such a thing can exist, that the whole thing, the Jorge Jesus project, was blocked by Neymar's dad.
Wow.
On exactly those lines.
So he's managed to do even more damage without even playing there. He's causing damage in all kinds of ways. With Ancelotti, the plan is for him to stay, right, and build towards the next World Cup. I saw Romario, tearing him to pieces in an article and was clearly furious. You mentioned right at the start of this, when Ancelotti first got the job, that there was this huge debate about we don't need a foreign coach, and others saying, well, we can be more progressive, and Ancelotti's a great coach and he's won this and he's won that, and we should go down that route. Presumably that debate has become even more polarized now, hasn't it?
Yeah, not least because of the characteristics of Ancelotti, who is kind of a coach who arrives with a Band-Aid, doesn't he? And you would have thought what they probably need now is a surgeon.
Yeah.
Someone to do a comprehensive rebuilding job. And that would be a man with an idea. And Ancelotti's idea is not to have an idea. So you do wonder if he is the right man for the task ahead. It's a very strange 4 years that Brazil have now, with Argentina, Uruguay and Paraguay qualifying automatically for 2030. South America's World Cup qualification campaign is really, really hollowed out. There's a Copa America in the meantime. It's become a kind of second string competition a little bit in Brazil, but it's all they've got, because with the Nations League and so on, it's so difficult to have matches against European opposition. So
is it too expensive to fire him, Tim?
Well, he's got himself on a fat long-term contract, so that would be an issue. But he's going to come under pressure now, the likes of which he's never faced ever. He has disappointed a nation of 220 million, and so I honestly don't know. That's the fascinating thing about it. I've no idea what happens now. It seems that he wants to stay, but there may be a part of him that just will take the temperature of the streets and think, well, you know what, I can do without it.
Yeah.
We'll wait. But as I say, they don't really have competitive
Tim,
tests.
what does it need? Yeah. Is the raw material not there? Are they not producing? Because when we talked about Germany earlier in the show, they're not producing certain types of players. They're not producing the centre forwards. They're not producing the right backs. There's certain players they're not creating. Is that the case with Brazil then for you?
Oh, very, very, very much. I mean, the production of players is wholly in the hands of the clubs, and they've seen the kind of player they can make most money off, which is the striker in the wide striker in wide spaces. Brazil have got more than them than they know what to do with. And so many of the countries that are doing well now, they have an FA project. Now, an FA project in Brazil is tough because it's a huge country. You know, it's far tougher to do that kind of project in Brazil than, say, in Belgium. But, you know, just to go back to 2018, which is 8 years ago now, you look at a team from Belgium and they've got De Bruyne, and Brazil don't have an equivalent. They've got Lukaku, and Brazil don't have an equivalent. And they've got Hazard, just to rub salt into the wound, who's the most stereotypically South American player on the field. So Belgium is producing these kind of players, and Brazil isn't. The way that they've used because everything here is about the coach trying to protect his job in a situation of a very low job security. So the youth ranks are usually used by the coach just to try and win in the short term so he can protect his own job. So some of the football they've been playing, for example, under 20 level, under 20 has become a very important conveyor belt to the senior ranks. Some of the football they've been playing at under 20 level, even when they've been winning, has just been absolutely deplorable. Doesn't get you anywhere. It serves for absolutely nothing. So a complete rethink, I think, would be advisable. But Brazil isn't really a place for collective projects. It's a place for individual projects of coaches trying to make a name for themselves. Well, they've had wake-up calls before and continued fast asleep. So I have absolutely no guarantees of what's going to happen now, not least because they can always produce enough players to be competitive. And they could easily have beaten Norway. You know, the penalty goes in, the Hendrick chance goes in, and it's a different game. It could be that the next triumph will persuade them that they don't need anything. But I rather think they do, because they are becoming not even a first top shelf football nation anymore, which is extraordinary for a country with the history and the football culture and the size of Brazil.
Amazing to think that Brazil, with all of those links to the World Cup, are out and are in decline by the sound of it. Argentina, though, the world champions, are still in it. And after the break, we'll get Tim's thoughts on their semi-final that's coming up live on talkSPORT against England.
Newcastle's summer exodus is set to reach a crisis point. Sean, you'll have heard this news. Sandro Tonali, Anthony Gordon, of course, already out the door. Club captain and fan favourite Bruno Guimaraes has reportedly informed the hierarchy that he wants to join champions Arsenal. With another star player forcing his way out, Darren Bent raised serious concerns about what this loss could mean for Eddie Howe next season.
Yeah, I do feel for Eddie Howe. I really do, because again, if Bruno leaves tonight, he's obviously gone to Tottenham as well. Isaac, they just haven't been able to kind of recruit the players certainly the quality that they've lost. And you look at what they've bought some of these players for. Isaac, was it 60 million? They're selling for 120. Like tonight, they bought him for a fee. They're selling for more. So clearly, he's improving these players. But at some point, I think if Newcastle do want to go to the next level, they've got. I know it's hard with the PSR and the financial fair play, but if they do want to go to the next level and then stay there, they've got to find a way of holding on to some of these players.
Oh, look at Darren, his floral number. Watching on the smart TV, I like that. Sure. Do you have sympathy for Eddie Howe in this situation? The latest is that Bruno has agreed personal terms with Arsenal, but Newcastle's stance is that he remains not for sale.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's really tough, and the challenge that you have is not just if one of your big players goes at any football club, at any level really. People understand there's a time and a place. When two go, that can make other players a bit itchy and a bit nervy. But then if three go, all of a sudden they go, hang on a minute, who are we bringing in? And I think they're right on that cusp. I don't know their situation at PSR, but I've been through that, obviously, in my time at Everton, so I know how dangerous that can be. But But I think losing the players of that quality, I think that's really tough on Eddie, and I think he's done a great job there. So hopefully, I mean, look, you never know on the other side of that. Good people in their recruitment there. They've shown that over the years, so they might have people lined up. Don't forget. So these things can twist very quickly when you get a freshness in the camp and a newness and.
You're listening to Trans-Europe Express. Delighted to say we've still got South American football expert Tim Vickery with us. Tim, of course, there's so much intrigue and fascination about this game on Wednesday between Argentina and England. That's going to be live on talkSPORT. Argentina, we were saying earlier, I must admit, after the group stage and those 9 changes they made against Jordan still look really slick, still look really good. Thought after the group stage, they look really good, you know, really smooth. And then it's all rather been less smooth since the knockout phase began, hasn't it? They've not looked very consistent. They've looked as though you can get through them. Messi has obviously worked his magic on several occasions, and they found those individual moments of quality. Are we yet to see a truly complete performance from Argentina in the knockouts?
Well, I think the group was very, very forgiving. And they were never really under pressure, and it was a continuation of what the thing really has been for 3.5 years, which was an extended lap of honour. There's been an air of like exhibition game about Argentina for a fair while now, not just celebrating being world champions, but a kind of celebration of the end of Lionel Messi and so on. And they were in that mode in the game against Cape Verde, and then suddenly they found themselves in problems. And I think it's done them the power of good, because the team, remember what they had to do in Qatar after losing the opening game against Saudi Arabia. They really, every game after that was a final. And in that Cape Verde game, at least they rediscovered their competitive instincts, their fighting spirits, and that has hauled them through. That defence has always been suspect. Always. I actually think probably the best that they played was against Egypt, even when they were 2-0 down. They were fluent. They were starting to get Julian Alvarez back.
Yeah.
When he started that game. I was just hearing to some journo talk about how, you know, the major threat to England could even be Julian Alvarez. I think his name was Hatch.
Oh, not him again. He's on everything.
Yeah.
Not him.
And I, whoever he is, I agree with him. And for anyone who's watched this team over the cycle since Qatar, Alvarez has often been even more important than Messi, and Alvarez, the presence of Alvarez, has often got the best out of Messi. So the worrying thing for England is Alvarez has now come into the tournament. It was a fabulous goal that got him out of jail against Switzerland, and then just like he does for the winning goal against Egypt, he's way back in his own half, winning the ball and setting the counter. In motion. He's such a complete player. And if it is, I don't think it's going to be, but if it is Spain, Argentina in the final, did you see that Luis de la Fuente, the Spanish coach, was saying he really wants Alvarez? I wonder what Oyarzábal's thinking about this. You know, he rates their centre forward more than he rates me. But the Switzerland game was fascinating because it's the first half-decent European side they've come up against since France in the final. The only European opposition was Iceland in a warm-up game and Austria in the second group game. And you saw against Switzerland, they didn't fancy themselves to pass through Switzerland. So the game plan was just go long for Alvarez and then fight for the second ball. And it was only after the sending off of Embolo that with 10 against 11, they started finding their passing rhythm. So how they're going to approach the England game, I really don't know. How much gas they've all got left in the tank, because it was a squad that came into this carrying lots of little knocks and lots of little injuries, and Alvarez among them. So I'm fascinated to see how they approach the England game. because certainly on the basis of what we've seen recently, for all the virtues of what has been a truly great Argentina side, and remember, either side of a World Cup, it's won 2 versions of the Copa America. For all of all of its great virtues, I would have thought England are narrow favourites for this one.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Tim. And I think the Alvarez thing is really key. I agree with you, because it was interesting when De La Fuente said that quote. He was asked, like, what one player would he like from another country if he, and before the questioner even got to the end of the sentence, he said Julian Alvarez. He just butted straight in there. Yeah. But I just wonder, when you're talking about how influential he is deeper into the tournament, and of course the fact that most players are managing knocks and what have you at this point, has that been the strategy, do you think, to keep him back for the back end of the tournament? The fact that they leaned quite heavily on Lautaro at the beginning of the tournament, and we know Lautaro, again, someone who has to manage tiredness because he plays so much football. And the fact that we know Julian Alvarez actually can't get through a season consistently either. They're quite comparable, I suppose, in that sense, and in terms of the amount of minutes they have on the clock, that you use the athleticism of Lautaro to get you into the tournament, and then Julian Alvarez is like your finisher for the big games.
I think more than strategy, it was necessity. They managed to get pretty much everyone in action in the 2 warm-up games they played, but not Alvarez. So I just think he just wasn't fit enough at the start. And some of his opening appearances off the bench, he's hasn't looked anything like. And I still don't think he's quite there yet, but he's getting there. And that I think is a worrying sign for the England defence.
Tim, I just wanted to ask you about Colombia, actually, because I thought they looked really strong for quite a long time in this tournament, and then obviously fell short against Switzerland. And I must admit, I know Switzerland are a really hardy bunch. We've praised them on the show already tonight, but I was surprised that Colombia fell flat, because to me, they looked a really nicely balanced team. They had threats from different areas of the pitch. Luis Diaz was sparkling. It was all going well. Has that caused a stir in Colombia? Has that been seen as a real setback?
Yeah, but remember, and I think the game that conditioned their campaign was a friendly against France at the end of March, when France put out the reserves, and France massacred them, absolutely massacred them. And it's forced something of a rethink. Colombia had to make sure they got themselves better balanced. Possibly they went too far the other way. What did this mean? There was one change of personnel with Puerta coming in for Rios, but it meant that they couldn't get caught anymore with 3 ahead of the line of the ball. You know, they got Luis Diaz, they got the striker who was ended up being Luis Suarez, and they got James Rodriguez. So James had to get back behind the line of the ball and put a shift in. That was absolutely vital, and that means he's only going to last an hour. And then they've got Quintero to come on and do a similar thing. But they were obsessed, I think, with the need to balance it out and to not get caught with too many players in front of the ball, as had happened against France. And so they lacked goals. I mean, they were terrific against Portugal, and it was a 0-0 draw. They absolutely massacred Ghana, and it was a 1-0 win. So there was a lack of goals. And the top goal scorer in this campaign was the right back, Munoz of Crystal Palace, and against Switzerland they came up against a good left winger in Undoy, who kept Munoz at home. And the clearest chance that Colombia had was towards the end, Munoz getting forward, and it falls for Campaz one-on-one with the goalkeeper, and he blazes over the bar. Munoz didn't get forward enough, I think. And the reason for that was they're still carrying a trauma of that defeat, that massacre at the hands of France. And so they wanted to make sure they didn't front load the side and have too many players in front of the line of the ball. And in the end, I think they'll probably look at that Switzerland game and think, we could have been bolder. We could have done more.
Yeah, and just to ask you, Tim, about Uruguay as well, because we do love a big blow-up, don't we, in the World Cup? And that was definitely the case with Uruguay, because Marcelo Bielsa, he doesn't do half measures, does he? And the campaign completely fell apart. Lots of acrimony. Canobio losing his head entirely. It was just a mess, wasn't it?
Well, they're actually better in this tournament than they've been for most of the last 2 years, which shows you how bad things have got. There's one thing you can't blame Bielsa for. almost all of that generation have gone off the rails together. So many players there haven't made the progress that would have been expected of them. You know, names like Ugarte, Bentancur, especially Darwin Núñez, so many of these players. So the raw material wasn't quite as good as it looked as if it could have been. But also, it's absolutely clear that, and the whole problem started when they spent a month with Bielsa in the Copa America in the States 2 years ago. And the players really couldn't get on with him at all. And Bielsa, to his credit, he went into detail about this after the whole thing. And I think a coach has this obligation to explain to the public where it goes wrong. And he's saying that they kept on asking him to give them less information. You know, instead of his half-hour tactical chats, they wanted 10 minutes, and then they wanted 5, and so on. So there was a generational divide there. I think really, probably one of Bielsa's problem is that he's coaching a bunch of players who've never heard of the flashing blade, and it was never going to work.
And they're the worst people, aren't they? The people who haven't heard of the flashing blade.
Quite
Absolutely,
right, yeah.
They're the worst people. Tim, always a joy, always an education. Thanks so much. We got half an hour of Tim Vickery goodness. Always great. Plenty to come on Trans Europe Express, including after the break, have FIFA shredded the last vestiges of their credibility?
I mean, as recently as 2024, Bruno Turzazol, he told everybody who cared to listen what he wanted to achieve at Newcastle.
Never said that I would like to leave. Since I signed for the club, I always said I want to put my name in the club history, and nothing changed. Nothing changed from me. It is keeping going. I still want to win some trophy for me. When I signed for the club, I said I want to play Champions League, and everyone said that I was crazy. And we got it. Now I wanna be in Champions League again. I wanna win something for the club. I think the fans deserve. We are working so hard to get it. So this is still my dream.
And then a year later, Simon, they win the Carabao Cup. And Bruno says, "This is my second home. We're making history. Someday, when I leave this club, I want the fans to sing my name the way they do Alan Shearer." I'm not sure that's going to happen.
Well, look, first and foremost, ask yourself the question, why are these players suddenly all deserting the sinking ship? It's not a sinking ship, but it doesn't appear to be a particularly ambitious one. It doesn't appear to have an ownership model that everyone thought was going to change the whole direction of football. Oh my God, we've just sold to a nation state, one of the richest nation states, and look what they're going to do to football. But they haven't done anything. They're going to buy everybody. They're going to buy Ronaldo. They're going to buy Messi. They're going to have this player here, that player, this player, you know, and they haven't. Yeah. They bought a bunch of players that to some extent they've gone and made better. And these players are now doing what every player does, which is go, Liverpool.
Yeah.
Oh, Arsenal.
Yeah.
Oh, Real Madrid. And that's what Newcastle have found themselves in a position of doing. So ask yourself the question, despite the vilification of a player that 2 years ago said he wanted to stay, nothing lasts forever. He's done his 2 years. He is entitled to leave. How he leaves is the key component part of this. But also, why? Why are Newcastle now a place where people want to leave from?
listening to Trans-Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassell on talkSPORT. We're ploughing through a 4-hour spectacular. It's been great fun so far. We're going to take a look at FIFA and their credibility on the world stage, really, as football's global governing body. Because, Andy, I think we need to look at this Folarin Balogun incident. And now, for people who don't know, aren't aware of what happened, the US striker was sent off in the round of 32 match against Bosnia-Herzegovina. And then the decision was taken not to wipe away his red card, but actually to suspend the suspension. Now, there was precedent for this from FIFA because Cristiano Ronaldo had been sent off for violent conduct before the World Cup, and it should have been a 3-match ban, but he had the final 2 games of that sanction suspended for the World Cup. So there was an element here where FIFA had some latitude and could make these decisions. But just a bit of extra detail here from talkSPORT's reporter Ben Jacobs, who's been doing some super work during the tournament. He's revealed that the decision to suspend the ban for Folarin Balogun was taken solely by the chairman of FIFA's disciplinary committee, Mohamed Al-Kamali, which is unusual, says Ben. Although FIFA do sometimes hear cases with a sole arbiter, it is traditionally one of the other 17 members. Precedent-setting cases usually have a 3-person panel. Now, of course, it was Ben and talkSPORT who revealed that Donald Trump had asked Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, to review Balogun's original sending off against Bosnia, and then he was then allowed to play against Belgium. So, look, lots of detail there, Andy. But I guess the truth is here, we still haven't had detailed reasoning of why FIFA decided to suspend the suspension. And therefore, that has led to a lot of understandable questions about the credibility of that decision.
Yeah, that's right. Martin Ziegler put this out in the Times as well, and it's it's just a further layer, really adding to the pressure that FIFA are under, and obviously the way that Donald Trump sort of confirmed that he'd been directly in touch with Gianni Infantino, and obviously we have to take certain US government representations to the media with a pinch of salt, but that it was flipped by Marco Rubio to him, and Trump confirmed it on the spot is just not a great look for FIFA, even in the context of recent cuddling up to controversial authority figures of FIFA in the 2018 World Cup and the 2022 World Cup. And, that is something that has really demonstrably changed about FIFA since Gianni Infantino's been in charge. Not just the fact that FIFA continues to suggest or to emphatically state that football and politics are separate, and then the president gets in up close and personal with major political figures of the world. The contradiction of that cannot escape anyone. And of course, I guess from an England perspective, the fact that the very same reasons that or reasoning that the English FA used to try and get Jarrell Quansah let off that is prospective suspension for that red card against Mexico, which I think they're absolutely right to do, particularly in the context. And they were just told, yeah, there's no latitude to do this. It just beggars belief, really. Now, look, I think we all came into the tournament with concerns about FIFA's ability to run it equitably and fairly. And I think there are still concerns in terms of the admission of various officials. And, that was the case with a certain match official. That was the case with the modified plan of Iran's national team, which we touched on earlier with John Durden. I think it's still a case with the ticket prices, which have obviously been unbelievably expensive. But I think when we get onto this as well, this is something that's, incontrovertibly changing the game. There's no doubt about that. I mean, funnily enough, I would also agree that what's happened with ticket prices and what's happened with selection of hosts over the last couple of tournaments has changed this. As someone who's covered a lot of World Cups and European Championships in the flesh, when we think about the pinnacle of world football, I think we think that because of money, that the Champions League has overtaken the World Cup. Now, it doesn't feel to me so much like we normally feel like that all the time at this moment, because this has been a very good World Cup on the pitch. But I would say that watching it on television and being in the stadium, obviously there are two separate things. Obviously, not everyone is lucky enough to get that experience. But I would say as well that the atmosphere in recent World Cups has diminished the spectacle because of where it's been played, because of the fact that it's been too expensive for fans from a lot of countries to go. And obviously that's been amplified and then some in this World Cup. That has a negative effect on the prestige of the tournament, on the ability of the World Cup and for football generally to be for everybody. And look, basically, I think the World Cup has been devalued in so many different ways, not just in this World Cup, but in other World Cups, because of overtly political decisions that FIFA has made.
I think as well, it was an even worse look for FIFA when Andrew Giuliani, who is a big part of the FIFA the US task force kind of dedicated to hosting this tournament, came out and said, well, when you've spent as many federal dollars as we have, we felt we had the ability to lobby FIFA and to speak to FIFA about the decision to, whether to have Balogun's red card suspended or reversed or whatever it happened to be. In the end, the sanction stayed, but was just kicked down the road. And what it does, I think, Andy, is it just adds to this feeling that, can you really trust what you're seeing? Now, that might be unfair, but what FIFA haven't been able to do is dampen down speculation. Now,
it's not unfair. Not only does football have to be clean, it has to look clean.
Yes,
it has to look credible. It has to look believable. It's just like when you're doing your driving test. It's not enough to look in the mirror. You need the instructor to see you looking at the mirror.
Yes.
Public confidence in every walk of life, be it football, be it the financial markets, is absolutely integral to its survival and its credibility. And I don't think it's too dramatic to say that. So I totally agree with you.
Because it feels really shaky. Because Argentina, Egypt, the truth of it is, when you look at it with a clear eye, you can see that Egypt collapsed late on. Yeah. They were 2-0 up. Yes, their second goal, what they felt was their second goal, was chalked off and they felt that was hugely unfair. You could debate that. That's fine.
Yeah.
They were 2-0 up and they collapsed. You could look at that. However, you have their coach coming out and saying this is rigged. You have one of their players coming out and saying this is rigged. Now, you look at it objectively and say, okay, that's, hyperbole. They've come out and they're emotional and whatever. But that kind of vibe exactly ties into what you're saying. The fact that those accusations are being thrown around by people who are involved, there's always going to be that kind of overreaction to going out of a World Cup. Of course there is. But we're hearing it louder and louder and louder, and from more and more people around the world, whether it's fans, whether it's players, whether it's coaches, whatever. So that then ties into the final point of this section, I think, Andy, which is Gianni Infantino in danger of actually losing his position as the FIFA president? Is this making him more vulnerable to a challenge at some stage, do you think?
I think we have to be open to and understanding where the whole world of football is at when it comes to FIFA and when it comes to Gianni Infantino. And before the World Cup, I said quite clearly, he shouldn't be the president of FIFA anymore. I don't think if he does have the good of football at heart, he's not capable of executing that. And I think that was clear before the tournament and is clear now. But what I think we have to bear in mind is when we go back to, I think it's the same with previous UEFA presidents. I think, you can look at Michel Platini, for example. Yeah. All this talk of the football family. What does the football family mean? Well, actually, inclusion is a great Trojan horse for saying, I need to keep everyone on side because everyone's got a vote. Whether it's the English FA or whether it's the Tanzanian FA. And I think that's very important. It's very important to acknowledge that by expanding the World Cup, whether that's a good thing for the spectacle or not, or it's a license for FIFA to print money, and they have printed money like never before in this tournament. Product is more important than quality, than what we're getting for it, really, because someone will always pay for it. That is the feeling, and that is the feeling in all football, I think, at the moment, which really concerns me, and which is a real problem for football going forward. But as well, the more people are included, the more people are voting for you. So, look, I think Gianni Infantino should be removed and could be removed if there was enough pressure. And I believe that there will be pressure after this tournament, particularly with the way it's being run. I think once the tournament started, football sells itself. It doesn't need any involvement from FIFA. And if they were smart, they would just step off and let football do its thing. Because you know what? Once a tournament starts, all the other inconveniences, whether it be stadium construction, whether it be legacy, whether it be even human rights, a lot of people forget about it once the football has actually started. FIFA and Gianni Infantino have missed a trick, actually, by keeping this stuff in the public eye. And if there's ever a moment where there's going to be a revolution against him and a revolution against FIFA, this is going to be it. And when the cards are so heavily stacked in his favour at the start of this tournament with the expanded format, that's an extraordinary thing to say, really.
Could it be one of the great own goals? We will see in the fullness of time. Andy, thanks for that. Coming up after the break on Trans Europe Express, we're going to talk transfers.
I think you're underestimating Bruno Guimaraes. I mean, you can look at the figures and say, yeah, not brilliantly impressive, but every Newcastle fan will tell you he's the heartbeat of their team.
Yeah, that's Newcastle, though, Jeff. Jeff, we're not Newcastle United.
Oh,
right?
Joe, don't be arrogant. Do not be arrogant, pal.
What do you mean not be arrogant? We're Premier League champions. I'm not saying I don't want him at the club.
Yeah, you're Premier League champions now. You're Premier League champions now. Let's come on in 12 months' time and find out if you're going to say the same thing if you're not Premier League champions then.
Jeff, of course we're Premier League champions. We just won it a few months ago. Come on, Yeah. So you got to give us a bit of time. What I'm saying is, good player, but I don't want him to be the marquee signing. If he is the marquee signing, I'm going to be upset.
Well, I'll tell you what, Joe, shouldn't you be worried? You're talking about marquee signings. Aren't you concerned about financial fair play, or the equivalent of as it is now? And you busting the rules.
Get rid of everyone you need to get rid of to make it happen. Because if you're spending 60 mil on a player, then that means people need to go as well, right? Get rid of. We've just spoken about Norgard. If you don't like him, get rid of
Trossard,
him.
Gabriel Jesus.
We're hearing Trossard. Get rid of all of them. To be fair, I do like Trossard. And if it was up to me, I'd get rid of Martinelli instead. But get rid of who you need to get rid of. Then we can start talking business. But this better not be the marquee signing.
I do the marquee signing, but I agree that Arsenal need a left winger. Do you know what I mean? Don't spend 80 million on Guimaraes and then you can't afford to go and buy, like, if Barcola's available, for instance, Joel, and he's worth 100. You need a top left winger, don't you, on that side?
100%. And that's what I want to see. I want to see someone. Look, the reality is if Marcus Rashford was available at a good price, I would probably go for him. As long as, it doesn't unbalance the team, because he's a great player.
You're listening to Trans-Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassell. We're going to finish the third hour of the show by looking at transfers and just a few players that might have caught Premier League eyes during this World Cup. Actually, what we're going to start with, Andy, I think, is just a reminder to people there has been, potentially breaking news being widely reported now that Johan Manzambi, who looked as though he was going to go from Freiburg to Newcastle, looks as though he's going to join Aston Villa instead. He is one of the breakout stars, I think, of this World Cup. He's a guy that carries the ball incredibly well in midfield for Freiburg. He's only 20. He was the most fouled player in the Bundesliga. And what that tells you is that, A, this is a guy who's brave on the ball. B, doesn't mind a bit of contact. But also, people find it incredibly difficult to stop him. If Villa do pull this off, and it looks as though that's the way it's heading, this is a real coup for them. And, of course, they faced him in that Europa League final against Freiburg.
Yeah, and, he was one of the few bright spots on the pitch for Freiburg in that Europa League final that I was at. And I thought one of the most noticeable things about him, actually, I don't know if this was on the television coverage because we were quite near the front behind the benches. But the thing that really struck me is at the end when Villa was celebrating, the Freiburg players looked disappointed, of course, because they just lost the final. But there was a sense of, we did great to get here and we enjoyed the occasion. And funnily enough, you had Yuri Tielemans, who might end up playing with him, as it looks like, go across to Manzambi to sort of say to him, chin up, you played really well. And Manzambi just brushed his hand off his shoulder as if to say he was the one Freiburg player who thought, actually, I don't feel fine about losing this. You can see that in him, that he sees himself going to that next level and going beyond, actually. So to see him move into the Premier League is no surprise for me. And, it's exactly the sort of player that a Premier League team wants, a player that we know can produce now, but really is about the deep potential he has. And the fact that he's at that age as well, where you can tell that he's really on the path to being absolutely world-class. And Premier League teams, as we've said so many times on here before, Kev, would far rather pay top dollar for that than look how difficult it was to get the Victor Gyökeres signing over the line.
Yeah.
Because in a way, Arsenal were kind of bidding against themselves a little bit in the back end of that. United were there, but Gyökeres knew he was never really going there. So I think to sell a player who's 26, 27, who's more proven, is much more difficult than selling a Manzambi these days. It's a real shame for Newcastle that they've lost out on this, or seemingly lost out on this. But it does strike me as, even if there's doubt whether Villa could really afford this, certainly at the start of the negotiations, it's a player that Villa really need for me, even without the Amadou Onana injury, because they're very different sort of players. It felt to me as if Villa were lacking a player outside Morgan Rogers who can really unlock the door. And obviously Rogers is a little bit more direct as well. They're quite different players themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about what Manzambi can do in the Premier League. I think he's a fantastic talent. He's really blossomed in a good Freiburg team. He's been very well coached by Julian Schuster, but I think he's got a lot more to give, and I think we're going to see that in the next few years. Talking midfielders, Ayoub Bouadi has been a name on a lot of people's lips during this World Cup. For him to play as well as he's played as a teenager for Morocco has been really quite something to behold. The way he played against Brazil, I don't think I'll ever forget it. It's one of my favourite World Cup performances because it was like he turned up for a kickabout with his mates. And he was coming up against Casemiro and guys like that. He was playing against Brazil in World Cup. And it was not quite pipe and slippers, but he was so comfortable bringing the ball out from deep midfield positions. He wanted the ball, wanted to take it, give it, get involved. You're talking about a guy that was 18.
Yeah, but this was him from the beginning. We go back just under 2 years on his 17th birthday, day after his 17th birthday, sorry. Played against Real Madrid in the Champions League, was hurried into starting because they had a ton of injuries, and Lille won 1-0, and he bossed the game, really. And to have a teenager boss a game like that against top-level opposition, it reminded me of Eduardo Camavinga.
Yes.
When at 16, he played and owned the midfield when Rennes beat PSG. Now, obviously, against Real Madrid in a Champions League game is an even slightly higher version of that, I think we can say. But Biadi's composure has always been it, really. You add that to his athleticism, I think it shows like what a good player he can be. And we're talking about those players who are in that sweet spot of being able to produce now, but also having quite a high ceiling to reach as well. I did feel that this tournament as well, the guy next to him, Neil El Ainoui, really didn't receive enough credit because Biadi was taking all the light. El Ainoui was brilliant, really, in the second half of last season for Roma. Once he got to the pitch of Serie A, he's been a good player for a really long time. Another one who's French-born, French brought up, of course, his dad was a pretty famous Moroccan athlete back in the day, and he was at many of those games in this summer watching his son. And he's a terrific player. It'll be really good to watch in the Champions League for Roma next season. But one that I've been pleased to see move, actually, while we're still on Morocco, is Marseille Barry, because he is really a catch-all offensive solution in so many ways. We saw a bit of how good he was in this tournament. It will be a big step up from PSV to Bayern, but having gone to PSV versus Bayern on match day 8 and seeing Saibari just pull a rabbit from a hat against Bayern, it's difficult sometimes to see a player play well against the team and then move there, and it's difficult to not think that they've been sitting there on the opposition bench going, this guy's dynamite. Let's get him so he can't do this against us again.
Yeah,
but
that's a very Bayern thing to do.
Feeling. It was quite an inescapable feeling at the end of it,
Yeah, no, I think he's going to do really well in the Bundesliga. I think the transitional nature of the league, I think he's explosive. He wants to run in behind. I think he'll be perfect, I think, for what Bayern want to do in the forthcoming season. And talking of club football, that's what the final hour will be on Trans Europe Express. We're going to see what you might have missed in La Liga, in the Bundesliga, in Serie A, and indeed in Liga. It's all coming up on the final hour of the show.
Because Infantino, though, Simon, has said, yes, I got a call from Trump on Balogun.
Yeah.
They have allowed themselves to be boxed into a ridiculous corner, haven't they?
Well, it's one thing players cheating on a field, but when the people that are supposed to uphold the game ignore the integrity of their own positions, to damage the authenticity of what people might be watching, and challenge the legitimacy of it by allowing one set of group of people to have an advantage and not on others, you should start worrying about the existential threat that has to the game, and start worrying about what's happening to the football and where it's going next and what will happen to it next.
Because if the Balogun situation did exist, and we never heard of a call going in from Trump to Infantino, the Quanta 2-match ban
would be less controversial.
Would be much less controversial. It would almost come and go.
But again, we've got to distill it backwards, I think. Mm-hmm. If you sit there and you say, why is there no process available to rescind a red card? Why would there not be one? What is the logical thinking? Maybe FIFA can explain to us why it was necessary for the Trump regime to instigate some thinking into FIFA that should have been there in the first place. It shouldn't require Trump to be involved in the conversation. Yeah. It should have been a simple appeal from, and by the way, US Soccer would have been all over this. It wasn't just Trump that did it. It was US Soccer that probably prompted him to do it.
Yeah.
And they're sort of going in the background. It's not us, it's our commander-in-chief. No, Trump makes all the noise and carries all the cachet.
Yeah.
But there should have been a process.
There's no regularity to this, Simon. Ironically, if you get sent off for in the Premier League for serious foul play, it's a 3-match ban.
Yeah. But that's because you've got a 38-game season.
Yeah,
This is a limited window.
Right.
So people are always going to condense it down based upon the size of the tournament.
Right.
But even more so in a limited window tournament, you should want an appeal process to be able to rescind in the same way that it can award upwards.
Yes.
It makes no sense.
The story of England's World Cup win in 1966 is the stuff of legend. Pickles and a lost trophy, World Cup Willie, they think it's all over. They couldn't have done it without the skills and goals of Sir Geoff Hurst. But his World Cup journey wasn't always plain sailing. But for a freak injury in the group stages in 1966, we may have never been speaking about Sir Geoff Hurst in the same way. He got the call after Jimmy Greaves had his leg sliced open against France in the final group match. Hurst got off to a flying start in the knockouts, literally, scoring the winner against Argentina 12 minutes from time in the quarter-final. He didn't score in the semis against Portugal, but his influence on the game was massive. When Greavesy was past fit for the final, though, the public and the press wanted their main man back in. Sir Alf Ramsey stuck with Hurst, and the rest, well, you know. His heroics prompted parties on the streets. Once the celebrations had died down, England started preparing to defend the trophy. And just look at their record between 66 and 70. Only 4 losses in 36 games. But when 70 came around, fate played a mean trick on Hurst. In the quarter-final against the Germans, Hurst scored a legitimate goal in extra time that was disallowed. And England lost. Basically the exact opposite of the 1966 World Cup final. With that, Sir Geoff's pretty short World Cup career came to an end. When you look at his stats, they aren't massively impressive. But when you consider 3 of his 5 goals came on that glorious afternoon at Wembley, it's not a bad trade-off. What you might not know about Sir Geoff, though, is that after retiring, he didn't stay in football. I mean, he tried, oh yes, but he packed in management after 2 years and later worked in insurance because he couldn't afford his mortgage. I mean, can you imagine Harry Kane in insurance nowadays? Yes, Sir Geoff may have only played in 2 World Cups, but crucially, he helped bring one of them home. Jules Rimet, still gleaming.
Welcome to the final hour of Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassell, sending all of our love to Danny. As always, while you've been focused on the World Cup, there may have been things you may have missed in La Liga, the Bundesliga, Serie A and Liga. Do not worry, we've got you covered over the next 60 minutes. We'll talk about transfers, we'll talk about managerial appointments as well. It's all coming your way on Trans-Europe Express. And Andy, we're going to start with La Liga. And let's start with Barcelona, shall we? Because they've been busy in the transfer market. At this point in the season, we're usually talking about, are they going to be able to register anyone? Have they got any money? But actually, things do seem a little bit more positive on that score. They've jumped through a few hoops. It looks as though they are going to have this one-to-one situation where whatever they make, they're able to spend. That hasn't been the case in recent seasons. They've already signed Anthony Gordon. It looks as though they're bringing Karim Adeyemi through the door from Dortmund as well. We'll get to Adeyemi in a moment. The thing about Gordon I find fascinating compared to Marcus Rashford, which is, you know, who was there last season playing that left-wing role. I think it's Gordon's work without the ball they're looking at. I'm convinced of it. I know people will look at it and say, well, You know, you spent a lot of money on Gordon. Is that the right thing to do? I think the offensive part of it is much of a muchness, maybe. I think it's his work without the ball, because if you're going to make this Hansi Flick pressing work, you need guys like Gordon who are super active defensively, whether it's in the press, whether it's in trying to get back in defending one-on-one. He's going to do that for you.
I think what's made the decision for Flick really is the fact that Rafinha had a load of little injuries, which he's taken with him into the World Cup, which, you know, is something we didn't get to with Tim, but I'm sure had an influence on Brazil, because someone like that who's one of their best players as well as a real leader, it can't not make a difference to Brazil. But I think in terms of fitness, they can't have another season with Rafinha like the one that they just had. Whether that happens or not, hopefully he gets himself into shape and he's not as good as we know he can be, because he still was when he played last season. I think the way he played when he was fit last season made it even clearer that they couldn't do without him, really, both on and off the field. He was so important in so many ways, but expecting that physical level when he's had a season really disrupted by injuries, when he's had a World Cup as well and he's had no time to really recuperate, it feels like it's a smart time to sign Anthony Gordon as well. So, look, personally, I've watched a lot of Gordon in the flesh over the last couple of years. Not 100% sold, to be honest. But what we do know is not only is he great off the ball, as you said, not only is he very intelligent, is the fact that he's being coached by Hansi Flick. Like, what he is now is almost irrelevant. I think what's relevant is what he'll be in 6 months. And if I would back any coach on the planet to make him better than he is at this point in time, it would be Hansi Flick or Pep Guardiola, really. Yeah. I think that's really where they're at. And I think there were slight tells, actually, with... I think Marcus Rashford's really unlucky not to get signed by them. And I love what Rashford did there last season. And he's better on the ball than Gordon, and he probably always will be, I think. But it was telling that Hansi Flick, whilst being very, very happy with Marcus Rashford, he did say, like, there are days when Marcus's head just isn't there. And he wasn't accusing him, actually, of a lack of effort or a lack of application, but just a lack of an ability to always 100% lock in. It just... it made me think they were happy with him, but they weren't 100% convinced. So I think that's what made the decision in the end. Now, look, I want to get onto the Adeyemi half of this, because this, I think, there are reasons, even if I wouldn't have signed Anthony Gordon for Barcelona, there are reasons why you could sign him, which I think are relatively easy to sell, as you say. Karim Adeyemi, I just don't get it.
Okay, so... Adeyemi is an eternal frustration for me, because I said there was another player I wanted to shake earlier on. I can't remember who that is now, but it seems I want to just really kind of lay into these players. But Adeyemi frustrates the life out of me, because I see glimpses all the time of what he could be. Mega quick, skillful, explosive, can make things happen, but only ever does it in bursts. He can do it in 3 games in a row, and then you won't see him for a month. And he has been told endlessly, publicly, by coaches, whether it's assistant coaches, head coaches, you have to lock in, you have to take training seriously, you have to cut out some of the distractions away from the pitch. If you do all that stuff, you can be a magnificent player. And he just hasn't done it. He didn't go to the World Cup with Germany. The talent is there. The pace is there. The physical gifts are all there. But it's whether mentally he can make that step. Now, I'm really intrigued about this because, again, exactly what you're talking about with Anthony Gordon and Hansi Flick. If Flick can actually shake him instead of me and say, look, Karim, this is what you could be. And if he can get a tune out of him, it's worth it. Because that guy, honestly, even if you used him against kind of teams that, you know, are outside the top 6 in La Liga, he'd cause mayhem. He just would, because in transitional moments, he'd be brilliant. I think, you know, he's the kind of guy that against the low block can whack one in from 30 yards. But it's a flyer. It's a punt. It's a risk. There's no doubt about it that They've looked at the market opportunity. They've looked that he hasn't got that long on his contract. They've looked at the fact that Dortmund were happy to sell. That's the truth of it.
Yes.
And they've thought, this is worth it. This is worth a go.
They've also looked at the fact they probably can't afford Julian Alvarez, who looks as if he might be going to Arsenal now, which I think would be fascinating, actually, to see Alvarez playing for Arsenal. But look, different question. I think.
But shall we talk about that for a moment, actually, Andy? Now that you mention it, because Arsenal fans will obviously, if this goes through, be mega excited. You know, speaking to Ray Parler recently, and Ray was saying, he was asked, what do you think Arsenal need? And before the sentence had even finished, striker. He said, need another striker, because if you're really going to, fight for the top prizes again, you've got to have that strength and depth at attack. Julian, to me, would be an enormous coup for Arsenal, because
he would on paper. Like, look, he is one of the best players in the world on his day, and I have no problem saying that. One of the top 10, I would say. But there's always the question of the physical load with him, and that is a massive problem. Coming back to the Premier League is not a way to fix that for me. Now, look, maybe if Arsenal are stacked enough and they rotate him with Gyökeres, maybe it all works. But I just think you look at this last season, and he's massively influential in the Champions League. His ability to positively influence games at the absolute elite level is not even a question. That's not even worth discussing. Can his body stand up to it? I think is the question. That's why Manchester City sold him to Atletico in the first place. Yeah. And you look at Atletico now, they got 7 league goals out of him last season. For a player that we're talking about being worth 150 million euros, maybe more. So I think if Atletico get out of this with a decent profit on what they paid City for him, I think they've done all right, and get some other team to assume the risk. Because the reward's very high, but I think the risk is very high as well. Whereas it's sort of the inverse of the Adeyemi deal, really, in that you're laying out relatively little. But for me, it feels like the winners of the Adeyemi deal, without anything having happened yet, are Dortmund, because they don't have to pay him a stinking great wage anymore, and they're getting back most of what they paid Salzburg going back a couple of years, and you don't have to put up with all this nonsense off the pitch as well.
Yeah. And just on Alvarez as well, he was quite public about the fact he wanted to leave. He said, it's my dream. My suspicion is he's talking about Barcelona, really. But that...
Well, he is, but it can't happen.
Yeah.
Because
the finances aren't there, are they?
Yeah, they're so far away. I think it's quite interesting, and I was saying this to, I think, Adrian Durham earlier in the tournament, like how the way he's handled this, and he's not someone who's like a public loudmouth or anything, but clearly with advice he's taken, it's like you can seize this moment, you can put yourself out there, and he's put himself in a position. I think at the start of the World Cup, Atletico thought, we can hang on to him, we can ride this out. Well, they couldn't. The minute he said that and it went around the world, they couldn't hold him. And I think that's really interesting, because if you go back to, say, Euro 2008, where Cristiano Ronaldo desperately wanted to leave Man United and he desperately wanted to go to Real Madrid, and United managed to keep a lid on that, even though he's the most famous footballer in the world at the time. They managed to keep him for that extra year. Now, if that was now, if Cristiano Ronaldo went in front of a camera and he said during that tournament, look, I don't want to discuss club football, I'm not interested in discussing club football, end of, when people were asking him about it all the time. And if he'd have said, I feel like me and United have gone as far as we want to go. We've just won the Champions League, and now I want to test myself somewhere else. It took me 15 seconds to say that. And if he'd have done that then, like, the world, like, it would have gone mad, wouldn't it, really? And from that point, maybe United would have found it hard to keep him. Not then, but if he'd have done that now, if we imagine Cristiano Ronaldo was that age now, it would have been an impossible situation. I guess it goes to show how much the world of media and transfers has changed, and the influence that the media can have on transfers.
Really intrigued to see what happens with Alvarez. Also really intrigued to see what happens with Jose Mourinho at Real Madrid. We haven't got loads of time left in the section, Andy, but I do want to ask you about this, because there's been talk that Mourinho's had a really positive conversation with Vinicius Jr. I think if that's true, that was very important. That was something he had to do. given what had happened around that Benfica tie and some of the really clumsy things Mourinho had said. So that's positive if that's taken place.
Yes.
But it's going to be box office, whatever happens, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It'll be really interesting. It will be box office until we have to watch the matches anyway.
Yeah, it's all the other stuff that's box office, not necessarily.
How did Guardiola put it? With slightly more swears. He's the king in there in the press conference room, and he certainly is. Look, it'll be really interesting. I think Real Madrid had to do something, but it feels like a lot of what they're doing is doing something to be seen to be doing something. Do I think it's going to bring them any closer to Barcelona? I don't think it will. Do I think it will bring them any closer to being European champions? I don't think it will. Even with the signings they've made, are those really going to improve them to the level where they're on the same sort of place as PSG and Barcelona and Arsenal and maybe Manchester City when they come back next summer, next season? I don't think so.
And what do we say about Jose Mourinho on this show? It's the law of diminishing returns. Surprise of the summer in La Liga. I'm going to say Victor Munoz going to Liverpool from Osasuna, because that did catch me on the hop, I have to say. I think it caught a lot of people out, actually. This is a guy that has been on the books at Barcelona, been on the books at Real Madrid. I think there are a few people at Real Madrid surprised by this, that they didn't bring him back because he played Club World Cup for them, but it was his breakout season with Osasuna. I think he's a really smart footballer. I think Liverpool fans are going to really enjoy him. Doesn't just play wide, can play through the middle. I think Andoni Iraola is going to have a lot of fun with him, and I think he'll really improve under Iraola as well. Andy, what's your surprise of the summer in La Liga?
Well, it's not Diego Simeone staying at Atletico Madrid, but it's something else at Atletico Madrid. They completed the signing today of the captain of Sporting, Morten Hjulmand, for 45 million euros. I think it's a terrific pickup. And it's funny, when you think of Atletico, I think we can lean into early stage Simeone cliches about, they like to play low block. They like to play really sort of reductive sort of football. Let's be honest, go back to the Champions League last season. They didn't at all. They were really entertaining. No, they don't have the players to do that anymore. But what they do need to take them to that next level and make them genuine challengers against Barcelona and Real Madrid, firstly in a domestic sense, before we get to the Champions League, they need a bit of guts, they need a bit of leadership, and Hjulmand is a born leader. He will make a massive difference to them.
Coming up after the break, we're going to take a look at what's happened in the Bundesliga.
We all expected, okay, we need to beat Croatia by 3 goals. We need to go and beat Ghana by 3, and then we should beat Panama by 5. We should beat Congo by 5. What's it like in a tournament? It's not always the case, is it?
No, definitely not. It's funny when I see, the betting, things, before the game, and I'm thinking this is not what we expect, on the pitch. I know that England are favorite against Norway, but when you look at Norway, they look really, really strong, as a unit, as a team. Of course, they have weakness, but England must be aware that if they don't get the position of the ball in this game, and this is where I agree with Troy Deeney, for example. I think with the player they have, England, they should be more confident with the ball. They should show more commitment with the ball, and composure as well. And this is where, something is missing.
Yeah. Well, we shall see if we can show that. I mean, if you look, on paper.
I'm just sorry to disturb you, Jeff, but for this game, England against Norway, I'm just wondering if Norway get the ball, is it what England wants into this game? Waiting, sit back, trying to play in counter-attack, or try to get the ball, the position of the ball, and try to conduct and manage, this game. So this is, for me, one of the key of this game.
Yeah.
Are you going to react with the ball and without the ball?
I mean, it's interesting because Norway had a lot more possession of the ball against Brazil than most people had imagined they would do.
Although the tactics from Ancelotti, did he say leave them with it?
Yeah.
I don't think we should do that. I think we should go after them. I really do.
Yeah, pressure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Text from Ryan. He said, Bellingham's been very good, but I think Arsenal's Morgan Rogers should get a chance in the next game. Ryan, dream on.
130 million, please.
Yeah, Bruno Guimaraes is going there. I just don't see Rogers going there as well.
Welcome back to Trans Europe Express. Kevin Hatchard alongside Andy Brassell. It's the last of a 4-hour spectacular, wonderful fun it's been so far as well. We're going to take a look at the Bundesliga. Been a few surprises actually over the summer in the Bundesliga. Maybe not a surprise is the fact that Nathaniel Brown has moved from Eintracht Frankfurt to Bayern Munich, because one of the areas that Bayern needed to look at, I think, was that full-back area. And Brown, I think, is the kind of dynamic player that Vincent Kompany wants to work with. Not only can he go on the outside from left-back, he can also move into central areas. I think as well it's a nod towards doubts about Alphonso Davies physically going forward. What's the deal with him? Is he going to be able to carry on as a Bayern player? How much are they going to get out of him? Do they need to cut their losses? Because they really did up his money after a long negotiation. And I do wonder what the future holds for Davies now that Brown has made that move. But Andy, the real shocks came in the coaching department, because Bayer Leverkusen had been linked with a whole range of different coaches, and ended up with a real surprise bringing in Carlos Martinez Nové, because there's a guy that has done really well with Toulouse. He's only 42, and this was not something a lot of people saw coming. And the feeling is that he wasn't necessarily anywhere near the top of Simon Rolfus's list, the sporting director. That might not matter. This could be a move that could work out.
No, that's right. And I think we normally talk about this with player signings, but sometimes the right signing isn't the sexiest one. And I think for those who haven't seen much of Martinez Nové, I think they'll be pleasantly surprised. What Leverkusen have needed ever since Xabi Alonso went is to retain that sense of playing in an enterprising style and to be able to be more physically proficient, like quick around the pitch, sharper. He can definitely provide that, I think. And I think he's someone who's really ambitious, who's really going to enjoy playing with better players and coaching better players than the ones that he had at Toulouse, because clearly there are more resources at Leverkusen. So I think this could really work out. And I think the fact that he's got that lineage from Barcelona is something that would have absolutely appealed to the Leverkusen board, because what they definitely needed going into this season is a philosophy. Because on pitch, they had a very, very clear philosophy when Xabi Alonso was in charge, and that took them into another dimension. But that's what they really lacked last season, and that was despite the fact they easily had one of the top 4 squads in the league. Yeah. That was why they
not making the Champions League was ridiculous, quite frankly.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's really interesting with them because I feel sorry for them in a way, because they lost a load of key players in the same summer. And that was always going to happen. And when you've got personalities like Xhaka move on, stars like Wirtz move on, supporting guys like Frimpong go as well, they lost other players as well. It was always going to be tough. The Erik Ten Hag hire was one of the worst in Bundesliga history. It wasn't the right fit from the start. Either for him as well, not just for them, for him as well. He never looked comfortable. He never seemed happy. And they were playing catch-up from that moment on. The one that has annoyed me a little bit, actually, is the one at Leipzig, because I've got a lot of time for Ole Werner. who was the coach, who delivered Champions League football, who delivered, I thought, some really good results, some really exciting football at times. But the wider Red Bull board, with Jurgen Klopp a big part of it, decided that Ole Werner was no longer the guy they wanted to carry on with. And they brought in Martin Demichelis, who has experience of German football as a player and as a youth coach. But he got relegated with Mallorca. Make this make sense, Andy?
You just throw me under the bus there, I think it's fair to say. We've gone from parking the bus in the last section to throw me under it in this section.
Exactly.
But it's really hard to get your head around it. Look, they obviously really liked Demichelis as a personality. He was in the frame and down the line to get the job before they sacked Ole Werner, who, let's remember, was explicitly Jurgen Klopp's pick to take over this job. And he spent ages bigging him up this time last year. So the drift away from him is quite interesting, and also in turn makes me think that they've maybe known that Klopp was on the way out for a while of Red Bull. But it is a strange one, because it's a little bit like when, I suppose you could say it's slightly different in terms of experience, of course, but it's a little bit like when Paulo Fonseca took over from Pierre Sage at Lyon. It was less that Sage had done anything wrong, although they had a mini bad run, I suppose, leading up to his sacking. It was that they wanted to give the other guy the job. So it's like, did you just crack an egg in the kitchen? Right. Well, there's going to have to be consequences, rather than anything actually being wrong with the incumbent. It feels as if...
It's brutal, though, isn't it?
It is mad, because remember how long as well, not only was he Klopp's pick, they spent ages putting together the deal to actually get Ole Werner out of Werder Bremen and into Leipzig.
Because the feeling was as well that, as you say, Klopp was very hot on Werner, and it made sense, because Werner plays that kind of high press, vertical football that fits in with the Leipzig brand. And Marcel Schaefer, the sporting director, was all in on Werner, and there've been discussions during the season where the wider board were a bit sceptical and thought, is this really going to work? And is he the guy to take us forwards? And then somewhere along the line, the wider board just decided, right, enough's enough, and they've made that change. So that's a bit of a wild one. One less wild is Adi Hütter going back to Eintracht Frankfurt. I'm all for this, actually, because that club needs stability. I thought he was really poorly treated at Monaco. I thought they got an itchy trigger finger far too early. Pocognoli came in and didn't fix anything, really.
No.
I thought that was a really bad decision. So I'm pleased that he's got a decent job. But Frankfurt, having had the Albert Riera debacle, and it was a debacle, bringing him in for Topmüller, and they got worse, they really need this to work. And probably Hütter needs it to work, right?
Yeah, they needed to play safe. I would agree with that. And it's interesting with this investigation going on into Markus Krösche, the sporting director, who's been there for a while, over his relationship with another agent and a property deal in Croatia. That coming so hot on the heels of his potential departure for Milan, which didn't materialise in the end. I think this is definitely a time that Eintracht need that bit of stability, because for all we know, what's worked so well upstairs for the past 5-6 years, you look at the money they've made in the transfer market, is absolutely unreal, really. That is threatened now, and the fact that they missed Europe so miserably, and the fact that the sales are fine as long as it keeps working on the pitch. And they've been consistently qualifying for Europe, consistently doing well in Europe. Of course, there was a Europa League in there as well. And that, together with the sales, makes you look like the perfectly run club. And then it goes to show, I guess, like what we were talking about with Leverkusen before, you're only really a bad managerial appointment, a bad coaching appointment, away from, drinking a can in the street rather than enjoying a glass of wine in a nice wine bar.
Well, after the Riera debacle, you don't even get a can in the street. No drink for you whatsoever. It really was an
Just
appalling hire. Yeah, an appalling hire. That's a show in itself, to be honest. My surprise of the summer in the Bundesliga was Alexander Nübel going to Besiktas. I think it's a real coup for them. Stuttgart had him on loan for multiple seasons. He'd done well. He'd won the German Cup. But they made a decision to go with Dennis Zeimann, who's been on loan at Paderborn and helped them get promoted. And so in the end, they decided not to sign him permanently from Bayern. Bayern signed him seemingly 10,000 years ago from Schalke, and he was supposed to be the heir apparent to Manuel Neuer, and then Neuer stubbornly refused to leave. And so there was no opportunity for Nubel in the end. But I hope he does well at Besiktas. I think he's a good goalkeeper. I think he's a bit error-prone, but I think at heart, he's a very good goalkeeper who could do really well in Turkish football. Andy, who's your surprise of the summer in the Bundesliga?
I'm going to go back to Leverkusen for this, Kev. And it's Leverkusen's first ever Portuguese player, Alfonso Moreira, who was one of the surprises of last season anyway. You know, reserve player at Sporting from their winger factory, ended up at Lyon. Injury to Malik Fofana meant he ended up playing really well. Playing far more than he was expected to. Had a brilliant first season in Ligue 1 and at first team level. As good off the ball as he is on it. Memorably noted that I really don't like running off the ball, but it's what the coach needs. Which I don't think a player who works that hard off the ball has ever said out loud before. No. But yeah, Lyon bought him for €2 million, sold him for over 30. It's a great deal for them. And if he plays anywhere like he did last season, he's going to be a huge asset for Leverkusen too.
Coming up on Trans-Europe Express, we'll tell you all about Ruben Amorim's new job. Yes, the former Manchester United boss has landed in Italy.
Are France that good, or have they been tested yet?
I think probably a little bit of both. I think they are that good. I think they are, because they showed second half what they can do in tight spaces and everything. But I think there needs to be a moment where they will inevitably come up, probably against Spain, hopefully against England, where with their teams, that more danger lies ahead. But they kind of, I think it was quite simple for France today.
Mate, they're coasting to the semi-final of the World Cup.
Yeah. Well, they're a good side though. They're a good side. They've got the best player in the world.
Do you know what I like about France? And it's a bit of a throwback. The forwards, when they get the ball, you see a lot of players, number 10s or midfielders, they'll get it and they'll pass it out wide and they'll come back and they'll go out the other side and then you might try and get to the byline. When France win the ball, they stick it into the front three or front four, and they run at you like through the middle of the park. And they just drive with the ball, a bit like what Gaza used to do. And then the game just opens up. And you're looking at it going, as a defender, I'm watching the Moroccans, they're going, how do you defend that? Well, you've got three people running off the ball, and then you've got the player with the ball running at you, straight at you. The second goal they score is just like them just going, well, I'm just going to run through you.
Well, it was 2-0.
Hard to defend again.
It could have been 4 if Mbappe scores that. JP had a chance at the end there, and brilliant, gets on his left foot and then scuffs his shot. And in the end, it was comfortable for France. They really didn't break a sweat. I don't remember their keeper having anything to do at all. There might have been a couple of crosses. I don't remember it. But, yeah, they're that good, mate. And I think they've got a little bit of a fear factor about them because everyone knows how good they are going forward. You cannot allow their 2 wide men to run at your fullback 1v1. You can't allow Elise to get on the turn, even in tight areas.
listening to Trans Europe Express on talkSPORT. We're well into the fourth of 4 hours on the show. If you've been with us for the whole journey or just a little bit of it, we welcome your company, each and every one of you. Right, let's take a look at what you might have missed in Serie A. We're going to start with Milan because it's been a real revolution there since their season collapsed, really, at the back end of the campaign. Ruben Amorim, the new coach, but he's not the only new face there. They've brought in pretty much a whole new front office, if you like, and the American owners deciding a new broom sweeps clean.
Yeah, I've got major doubts over whether this is going to work, to be perfectly honest. I think clearly there was a knee-jerk reaction to them not making the Champions League, which was an enormous shock if we go to the end of last season, to the final day of last season when they dropped the ball on game 38. And they get rid of Allegri, the coach. They get rid of Iletari, the sporting director. And it's just a massive sort of sporting level cull, really. And they don't have a plan to replace anyone either. And so eventually they speak to a load of different coaches. Amorim gets the job. Now, look, unlike a lot of Manchester United fans, I still remember what happened at Sporting. I like Amorim as coach.
Yeah, I do too.
But it appears that the plan going forward is to let Amorim have a great, in this restructure, is to let Amorim have a greater influence on transfers. I'm not convinced that's a great idea.
Alert.
Because, well, that's not good when it's any coach, because it's not good for the club, because essentially the coach will pick the players that are going to suit him now. He's not going to pick players who are going to be great long-term investments of the club. It's not about the overall health of the club. This is how you get lumbered with loads of rubbish that you can't get rid of down the line, doesn't it, really? Because they need players, a coach needs it to work now, not in 6 months, not in 3 years.
Especially after what happened at Old Trafford, right? Because if this was Sporting Amorim and he'd gone straight to Milan, he's got a bit swagger, he's got credit in the bank, everybody's, very hot on him for obvious reasons because of the success he had in Portugal. This is very different, because he took an absolute battering at United. Some of it fair, some of it not fair. I know Carrick's come in, it's all very romantic and he's done very well and he's taken them forward fine. But we still don't know what would have happened if they'd have kept Amorim. The only reason he got dumped was because he had a hissy fit because they'd asked him to consider going to 4 at the back and it all went wrong and rather unedifying. That's the truth of it. So
the plus for him is there's no sporting leadership to make him do that at Milan. Well, that's good for Milan, I don't know, but it's good for Ruben Amorim. Now, look, they've been out there and they've spent some big money already. Now, I tend to think it's a little bit of an overpay for Gonçalo Ramos, much as I love him, because they've paid an enormous amount of money for him, and money that I wasn't particularly aware that they had. They've also got him backed in by buying Mario Gila, the centre-back from Lazio. Again, another big fee. Presumably, they're thinking they're going to make some of this back at some point by selling Rafael Leao. As things stand at the moment, obviously they're going to get nowhere near his 175 million euro release clause. That's right, 175 million euros. Very much a contract of its time, I think is fair to say.
There's as much chance of somebody paying 175 million for the two of us, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, you never know. Saudi's out there, and maybe that's the option for him, because it doesn't feel like there's a lot of Premier League interest at the moment, which is a shame. But I think it's realistic given his form over the last year or so.
Where are you at on him, actually? Because now that you've mentioned him, I'm really intrigued by this, because my feeling on him is he's a player you want to like. He's a player you want to do well, because you see flashes of these incredible runs, these bursts of pace. Guys who watch him every single week in Serie A are much more defensive of him than guys who only watch him in, say, in the Champions League or whatever. To you, what level's he at? Is he a top player? Is he somebody that could go into a Barcelona or a Real Madrid or a top Premier League club?
No. He's someone who if I was a Tottenham, I would be looking at buying him.
Right.
I think it's fair to say. Now, it seems like they're not interested, but I feel he would be an upgrade on what they've got. Because, again, the ceiling is high. But he's not young anymore. I think that's an issue. You feel like he's a young player, but he's not, is he? And I think that is the problem, that he's kind of gone backwards since he won the Serie A MVP. Look, I think he's not given enough credit for what he's done for Milan overall. But last season, I think you look at the fact there's always been some doubts about his attitude, what he does off the ball. And he's got the tools to excel in every area, by the way. He's got the tools to be one of the absolute best. And on his day, you definitely want him on your team. He's breathtaking to watch when he's on it. But last season, he got a respectable amount of goals in Serie A, but he's not really providing anymore. So if you're a wide player and you're not providing and you're not scoring goals in a massive volume, like what are you doing, really? Yeah. So he can say that he wants to move on. I think it's probably the best thing for Milan that he moves on as well. And, it would be good for them if there were more options. But we talked about replenishing the transfer funds for Ruben Amorim. If they can't sell Leao, what's the next option? Does that mean that Rabiot is going to have to be sold to Lazio, to Napoli, for example?
Yeah, they've backed themselves into a corner already, it seems. So we'll see if they can sell Rafael Leao. You've just mentioned Napoli. I got told off by the excellent Serie A World Feed commentator Patrick Kendrick the other week because I suggested it was not a great look for Italian football that Max Allegri can completely blow the season with Milan and walk straight into another plum job with Napoli to replace Antonio Conte. Now, I accept Allegri has a wonderful CV, don't get me wrong. However, the recent experiences of Allegri ball are not good. So this has a big question mark attached, doesn't it?
It does. And I think when you look at the squad and when you look at some of the football that Napoli fans were treated to going back a little while now, I suppose once you're the other side of Antonio Conte, maybe you don't care about the football as much.
Maybe
you just want to win. And he's got better sporting management, he's got a better president, and he's got better players than he had at Milan. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But there's a lot that he's got wrong, and it's felt like, especially in the back half of last season, when he had so much time to coach the players, Milan weren't even playing European football.
It was an enormous failure.
That it fell apart in the second half of last season reflects really, really badly on him, I think. And, when you look at the form of, say, a Christian Pulisic in the back half of last season, that reflects really, really badly on him as well. I don't feel as if any Milan players really enormously developed under him. And given how well drilled it looked in the first half of last campaign, it's a real problem. Obviously, there's a bit of pushback from fans already, so he needs a really good start. He probably needs someone like Rabiot, who is someone who can kind of run the game for him on the pitch, because Rabiot's an unbelievably underrated player.
Yeah.
He's so good, and he's been great in recent years as well. I think for the past 3 or 4 years, he's been exceptional wherever he's been, despite various fallouts and all the rest of it. So if it was a signing that Napoli could make, they should make. I think it's fair to say. But yeah, it does feel that as if he's tactically a little bit of an anachronism. And the thing is, when you're not playing exciting football, results are all you've got. So if the results don't come, you're in trouble straight away, aren't you?
Exactly that. My surprise of the summer in Italy, Maurizio Sarri going to Atalanta. I'm excited about this. I'm still very much a devotee of Sarri ball. I think it can work. Atalanta generally have played some very exciting attacking football. I think there's an opportunity there for him to kind of, maybe rebuild his reputation a little bit. I still think he's done some great stuff, but I think there's another swan song here. I think he can do something in Bergamo. What's yours, Andy?
Well, my surprise of the summer would be Gennaro Gattuso coming to Lazio to replace him. But that's not a surprise, is it? Because they're cheap. And he will take the most unpromising of jobs. That is, his MO as a coach. I think really one of the most unpleasant surprises of this summer is Roma, having qualified for the Champions League, have spent half their summer wasting it chasing Mason Greenwood, a player who seemingly a huge portion of their fans do not want them to sign.
Yeah.
As it happens, he's not going to sign for them anyway. It looks like he's going to sign for Fenerbahce instead. There's still an outside possibility that Atletico Madrid get him, and they'll be left picking off Chelsea's cast-offs, maybe Alejandro Garnacho or Diego Moreira, who actually the latter of which I really like.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, Moreira, even though he would be a cast-off to some extent, I think he's a really good player. Coming up in our final section of Trans-Europe Express, we're going to take a look at what you might have missed in Liga.
They get into this weird situation where they forget what happened before. So all the big games, they played Havertz, right? Gyökeres, who you bought in at the start of the season, was going to be, for all the big games, in all the big games, he was on the bench.
Yeah.
Facts, that's what happened. So the manager doesn't trust him. That's not our opinion, that's just objectively looking at it. Havertz gets injured quite a lot, unfortunately. Gary Jesus is not the same since he's come back from his injury. So if you're now telling me that you can get through this season again and everybody else is going to be as poor as they were last year, I think you're just forgetting the fact that you lot were all losing your marbles around the Man City loss. And it was, we need a proper striker. Arteta don't know what he's doing again. You win the league, it's great, we're going to win it.
No, but you know, what I've always said to, I've always said to you, I always said to him that Gyökeres wasn't bought in for the big games, didn't I? I said that to you. We bought Gyökeres in.
What?
For the
No,
game.
I get
listen,
explain. I want to hear
the year before, Arsenal, it weren't the record against Man City's, the Liverpool, it weren't that cost us the league. It was we couldn't beat Fulham, couldn't beat West Ham, couldn't beat them lesser clubs. Gyökeres coming. I mean, he said it. Right, it's one of them. Gyökeres this season, though, Gyökeres this season scored against the Fulhams, the West Ham, so we didn't have a problem getting past those teams, which is why then we went on to win the league.
Okay, I think you won the league because you played very pragmatic football. I'm not actually allowed to say the type of football that people are calling it on air, but you played a certain type of football.
Would you play that type of football to win the league?
No.
What?
What
are
you
talking? Of course you would.
Honestly.
If I was a footballer.
No, it's just like...
You're my team.
Yeah.
No, I'll be happy like you lot. I'll be exactly... You get me? I'll be happy. Of course I will. But
would you like to see Spurs play that way to win?
Brendan Johnson scored with like his knee or something and we won the trophy. I'm happy. I don't care, bro. However it gets done, I'm happy. I don't really care. But what I'm saying is, you can't like gloat about it and say, oh, we don't need a 9. That's crazy. You do need a 9, respectfully. What are you talking about, bro? If you sold Osimhen and Havertz right now, you could... sorry, Osimhen. If you bought Osimhen and sold Gyökeres and Havertz right now, you'd be great. You'd be fine. You could buy Barcola. Barcola and Osimhen changes their team, bro.
Do you know what? I'm happy with what we got.
Oh, you're a liar. That's a lie. You're a liar. That is a lie. That is a lie.
You're listening to Trans-Europe Express on talkSPORT, final section of the show. We've been talking about club football in the last hour, and we're going to have a look at what you might have missed in Liga this summer. Andy, PSG back-to-back European champions. Of course, they've dominated Liga, although they were pushed pretty hard, actually, by Lens in the season just gone. We know about their top stars, but there's a level underneath that of players that are probably quite frustrated about how much they're playing. Gonzalo Ramos, we mentioned in the last section, going to Milan. And you think there'll be a fair few other players that make the move as well?
They're going to make a ton of money selling players this summer, I think, Kev. Kang-in Lee is the next one. He looks like he's going to Atletico Madrid. There's just some crossing of T's and dottings of I's to go in that. And do you know what? I think they needed to do this because they've been brilliant over the last 2 seasons. But it's such a challenge to keep that going. They've already done something remarkable in winning the Champions League in 2 successive seasons. And honestly, it could have been 3 because everyone likes to frame it as Mbappe went and they won the Champions League, which is factually correct. But they could have easily won it that last season that Mbappe was there. And if they didn't miss enough chances to win 10 games in the 2 legs against Dortmund.
They hit the woodwork 6 times.
I mean it's remarkable.
Times.
It is remarkable. They were very, very good in that season as well. So I think really to keep it going with the team that they've had over the last 2 years, they don't really want to change much about the starting 11 because the starting 11's brilliant. But you start to ask your question, like, why do so many of the good players outside the starting 11 not getting it? And then you realise you have to change something. You can make money for these guys while they still have a high reputation, and you need to mix it up a little bit. Now, it's not like the team needs major surgery, but it probably does need a little bit of new impetus. They were physically challenged a lot by the Club World Cup in between the 2 seasons, and that's what made the second Champions League win even more remarkable. So I think to press home that advantage, they clearly need to do that. They need to generate some money to spend some money as well, and they will go out there and get a couple of big players as well. There's no doubt about that. But I guess the real question, the pivotal question, is Bradley Barcola going to be one of those? Is there going to be someone out there who's going to spend that sort of money on him? Because of course there's been a bit of an impasse with his new contract. It feels as if he's a bit more alive when he's around the French national team than he has been over the last little while. Look, I think really the arrival of Khvicha Kvaratskhelia has been brilliant for PSG, but it's not been brilliant for Bradley Barcola. No. So there would be a change there. I think he'd be great for Arsenal, for example. I think he's exactly the sort of upgrade in exactly the sort of position that they need an upgrade. But in terms of them continuing to dominate, there's only one way to look at it. I mean, it's been announced this evening, Kev, that they've extended their contract with Nike to provide their kit. They've still got 6 years left on that contract, by the way. They've now extended it to 2037 at 100 million euros a year. Now, the advantage that gives you in French terms, when they're still trying to build a sort of, domestic Netflix of TV rights in Ligue 1 Plus, I can't even put that into words. At the start of last season, these teams in Ligue 1 were not allowed to put TV income on their sort of budget for the season. So for a team to be given 100 million euros by their kit manufacturer per year, and that's before you get to all the other stuff, the Jordan deal and all the rest of it, it's remarkable.
Well, I'm so relieved because I was worried that obviously they wouldn't have enough cash, PSG. I know that's been a big issue, and that the other teams in Ligue 1, we're going to catch them up. So I was really worried about that. So I'm glad. That's heartening news.
You're going to sleep well tonight.
Yeah, exactly that. I was really concerned for them. Some breaking news, by the way, which is always fun. Slaven Bilic, the former West Ham boss, has agreed a deal to return as Croatian manager. talkSPORT understands that he's going to replace Zlatko Dalic. Just a quick word on that, Andy, because Dalic has done a phenomenal job in the last 9 years. A hell of a job to replace him. But of course, Bilic, knows that job, knows the Croatian football scene inside out.
Yeah, and it's easy to forget that when Dalic got the job, there was a lot of blowback, really. A lot of people thinking it was evidence of cronyism in the Croatian FA because he was a guy with not an unbelievable CV, I think it's fair to say, and a lot of work in the Middle East in that, which was definitely disrespected at the time. And he has done an amazing job, especially given that he's sort of been the warden while they've undergone quite a change in the sort of experienced players that they've lost over the last couple of tournaments. So now it's a completely different job for Bilic because he's got to bring through this next generation. I mean, obviously Luka Vučković of the Premier League is going to be one of those over the next little while, and they've got a couple more coming through as well. So good luck to him.
Just back to Liga, some quite interesting coaching hires. Davide Ancelotti to Lille, the guy that he's replacing at Lille, Bruno Genesio moving to Marseille, and Liam Rosenior back in Liga. He was at Strasbourg, then he was at Chelsea. Didn't really work out very well. And now he's at Paris FC. So that's going to change the coaching landscape significantly, those three hires.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I wonder if Davide Ancelotti is the most interesting one, really, because, of course, he's worked a lot with Ancelotti Senior and done a good job. I think what we saw in his brief time at Botafogo is he's a very gifted communicator in a number of languages, comes in speaking perfect French, which is a great start, certainly from an optical level. But really, for him to go in and take over a club when he's relatively inexperienced in the top job that's qualified for the Champions League, it feels like quite a risk, both for him and for them. So I'm really interested to see if that will come off. In terms of Bruno Genesio, like one of the underrated coaches in Europe, Marseille have needed someone who is reliable, someone who can produce good football, someone who can command the respect of senior players, which he definitely does. We've seen that at Lyon, we've seen that at Rennes, we saw that at Lille, but of course qualifying them for the Champions League just before he left. So look, you can never control what's happening upstairs at Marseille, but in terms of on the pitch, I feel it'll be a massive upgrade from the last couple of coaches, and I actually include Roberto De Zerbi in that. I think Genesio is absolutely great. Liam Rosenior is an interesting one because obviously people have a certain view of him from what happened at Chelsea. I'm not sure he ever really had a chance.
No.
But of course, he knows the multi-club model, and there's a feeling that he fits the model of what Red Bull and the Renault Group are trying to do a lot more than Antoine Camboire, who needed to stop them from getting relegated, but is basically a bit of a cantankerous old man. And they needed something a bit more youthful and forward-looking. And you feel Rosenior provides that. I think he'll do well there.
I feel on this show we should stand up for cantankerous old men. Some would suggest that your two hosts for the last 4 hours may fit into that category. Let's take a look at the, certainly when we're talking about FIFA, that's the case. Let's take a look at the poll results. I was a little bit surprised by this. Who will win the Cup, the World Cup? That was the question we asked you. France, 54%. So a bit of heads ruling hearts here. England got 36%, Spain 5%, and Argentina 5%. So France significantly outstripping England in that poll. That's an interesting one, Andy, actually. I did think that England were going to absolutely run away with that. Andy, for the last 4 hours, it's been an utter joy and an education. It's been great
Likewise.
fun, very much. Enjoyed the show. We've covered lots of ground, both in terms of the World Cup and in terms of the club game. Now, remember, both World Cup semi-finals coming your way on talkSPORT Tuesday. We've got that